Today, we're venturing into Texas's most abandoned ghost towns, where empty streets hide ancient nightmares, and darkness doesn't just fall, it attacks. These aren't just forgotten places on a map. They're hunting grounds where the past never died, from abandoned mines that breathe with unnatural life to main streets where shadows have teeth. Get ready for 4 Texas ghost towns where nighttime means fight for your life. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. My name's Wade Trevino. I'm from Wink, Texas, and I work as a cable line installer. Been doing it for going on 7 years now. Climbing poles and running wire through places most people forget exist. That's how I got into urban exploration in the first place. Because my job already takes me out to the middle of nowhere, to old buildings and dead towns and places where the infrastructure still needs maintaining, even though nobody's lived there in decades. You start to notice things when that's your life. You start to wonder, what's behind the boarded up windows? What's at the end of the roads that don't show up on your work GPS? That curiosity got me into filming abandoned places with some buddies of mine. We'd put videos up on YouTube, nothing huge, maybe 3,000 subscribers, just enough that people would comment and tell us where to go next. We called ourselves West Texas Forgotten. Stupid name now that I think about it, but we thought it was cool back then. Back before Terlingua. Back before I understood that some places are abandoned for reasons that don't fit in any kind of logic you can explain to someone who wasn't there. I'm recording this at 3:17 in the morning because I can't sleep again, and I figure if I get it out, if I just say it all the way through one time without stopping, maybe it'll stop playing in my head like a stuck record. I don't know. Maybe not. But I have to try, because it's been 4 months now, and I still can't close my eyes without hearing it. The picking, the tapping, the sound of metal on rock coming from somewhere below me when there's no below. When I'm in my apartment on the 2nd floor and there's nothing underneath me but the parking lot and the foundation and dirt, but I hear it anyway. Every single night around 2 in the morning I hear it. And I know in the part of my brain that still works right, that it's not real. That sound can't travel 400 miles from the Big Bend region to Odessa where I live now. That whatever we heard down in those mines is still in those mines and can't reach me here. But my body doesn't believe that. My nervous system doesn't believe that. Something in me is still standing in the dark, at the mouth of the Chisos Mining Company shaft. Number 4. Listening to sounds that shouldn't exist. Watching shadows move in ways that shadows don't move. Smelling that sharp metallic tang that I later found out is what mercury smells like when it's in the air, when it's in the rocks, when it's been seeping into the groundwater and the soil and the lungs of anyone who breathed that air for too long. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about the day we left, because that's where the mundane parts are. And I need to remember those parts to convince myself that there was a time before, that I wasn't always this person who jumps when the refrigerator kicks on, who can't use the stairwell at my job because the echo of my boots on concrete sounds too much like pickaxes. I need to remember that I used to be normal. It was a Thursday morning, October 19th. I remember because it was my mom's birthday, and I'd called her the night before. Told her I'd be out of cell range for a couple days, but I loved her, and I'd bring her something from the trip. She asked where I was going, and I said Terlingua, the old mining town near Big Bend. And she got quiet for a second in that way moms do when they don't want to say what they're thinking. She just said, "Be careful, mijo," and I laughed because I'm 31 years old, and I've been climbing telephone poles in thunderstorms for almost a decade. What's a ghost town gonna do to me? I wish I could go back and listen to that silence. I wish I could hear what she wasn't saying. Because I think maybe she knew something. The way older people from out here sometimes know things about places, things they picked up from their parents, who picked it up from their parents going all the way back to when this land was something else. Something that didn't belong to anyone who tried to tame it. I had oatmeal for breakfast. The instant kind. The maple brown sugar packets that you just add hot water to. I was standing in my kitchen in my underwear, eating it out of the pot because I didn't want to dirty a bowl, looking at my phone and scrolling through the route we'd planned. Me, Danny, and Sophia. Danny Quintero was my best friend since high school. Worked at the Valero refinery doing maintenance on the cat crackers, the guy who got me into urban exploring in the first place. Sophia Reyes was someone we'd met through the YouTube channel. She lived in Alpine and knew all the back roads around Big Bend. Every place the tourists don't go, every piece of history that the Park Service didn't put on a plaque. She'd been the one to suggest Terlingua. Not the main ghost town that everyone visits with the gift shops and the chili cook-off every year, but the other, Terlingua, the original mining settlement up in the hills where the Chisos Mining Company pulled cinnabar out of the ground for 50 years until the mercury market collapsed and everyone just walked away and left everything behind. I remember putting on a gray shirt that morning, one of those moisture-wicking ones from Academy that I wear for work, and jeans that already had a rip in the left knee from snagging on a cable housing the week before. Steel-toe boots. The tan Ariats I'd bought myself for Christmas last year. I packed light because we were only planning on staying 2 nights, just enough to explore the main mine shafts and film some content for the channel. Sleeping bags, tent, headlamps, extra batteries, protein bars, water jugs, tripod, 2 cameras, microphones, standard kit. Nothing special. I remember looking at my apartment before I locked the door and thinking I'd be back Sunday night. I'd do laundry Monday morning before work. My life would continue exactly as it had been continuing. I had no idea that I was about to become someone else, that the person who walked out that door on October 19th was not the same person who would eventually come back 3 days later with 2 days missing from his memory and a ringing in his ears that still hasn't stopped. Danny picked me up around 7:30 in his silver F-150, the one with the lift kit and the KC lights mounted on the roof that we used for filming at night. He had the AC cranked even though it wasn't that hot yet, maybe 65 degrees. And he was playing that conjunto music he always listened to when he was in a good mood. I threw my bag in the bed next to his gear and climbed in the passenger seat, and we just drove. Man, we just drove through the kind of morning that makes you remember why you live in West Texas, even when everything else about living here is hard. The sky was that perfect blue that goes on forever. The kind of blue that makes you feel small, but not in a bad way. And the sun was just coming up over the oil derricks outside of town, turning them into these black silhouettes against orange and pink clouds. We stopped at a Stripes in Fort Stockton for gas and breakfast burritos, and Danny bought a pack of those little powdered donuts that he was addicted to, and we talked about the plan, where we'd meet Sophia, what we wanted to film, whether we should try to go into the main shaft or start with some of the smaller prospect holes that were supposedly scattered all over the hillsides. The drive from Wink to Terlingua is about 4.5 hours if you take 285 down to I-10 and then cut south on 118 through Alpine. It's the kind of drive where the landscape changes on you so gradually that you don't notice until you look up and suddenly you're not in the flat Permian Basin anymore. You're in something older, something with mountains and canyons and rock formations that look like they were put there by something that wanted you to feel watched. Sophia had told us to meet her at the Study Butte store, which is this little convenience store slash gas station slash gift shop at the junction where 118 meets 170, right at the edge of Big Bend National Park. We got there around noon, and she was already waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her beat-up white Jeep Cherokee with a cigarette in her hand and a map spread out on the hood. Sophia was maybe 40, 45, hard to tell because she had that sun-weathered look that everyone gets out here, deep lines around her eyes and mouth that made her look older, until you saw how fast she moved, how sharp her eyes were. She'd been a park ranger for like 15 years before she quit over something she never fully explained. And now, she worked at the Starlight Theater restaurant in Terlingua Ghost Town. The tourist one, waiting tables and telling stories to visitors who didn't know the difference between the terlingua everyone visits and the terlingua we were about to go to. She stubbed out her cigarette when she saw us pull up and said, "You boys ready for this?" And I said, "As ready as we'll ever be." And Danny said, "Let's go find some ghosts." And Sophia laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that meant something was funny. It was the kind of laugh that meant she knew something we didn't, and she was trying to decide whether to tell us. She didn't tell us. Not then. She just said, "Follow me," and got in her Jeep, and we followed her down 170 toward Lajitas, and then off onto a dirt road that I swear wasn't on any map I'd looked at, a road that wound up into the Chisos foothills through Mesquite and Creosote and Ocotillo, past abandoned stone foundations and rusted-out truck frames, past warning signs that said private property and no trespassing, and one that just said danger in red letters, so faded by the sun they were almost pink. Sophia drove like she'd driven this road 1,000 times before, like she didn't even need to look where she was going, and Danny and I just bounced along behind her trying to keep our equipment from flying out of the truck bed. Watching the dust cloud, she kicked up, turned everything behind us into a brown haze. We drove for maybe 45 minutes on that road before Sophia pulled off onto what wasn't even a road anymore, just 2 tire tracks worn into the rocky soil between the bushes. And she stopped and got out and pointed up the hill and said, "We walk from here." I could see the structures from where we were standing, maybe a quarter mile up the slope. These dark shapes against the hillside that looked like they'd grown out of the rock, rather than been built on top of it. Old stone buildings with collapsed roofs, wooden frames bleached gray by a century of sun. The rusted skeleton of what might have been a water tower or a head frame. And beyond all of it, the mouths of the mines themselves, these black holes in the hillside that seemed to pull the light in and not let it back out. I want to tell you something right now so you understand the rest of this. I want to tell you that I am not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts or demons or curses or any of that. I believe in what I can see and measure and prove. I've been to dozens of abandoned places, and I've never once felt anything that I couldn't explain with normal physics and my own overactive imagination. So when I tell you that something felt wrong the moment we started walking up that slope, when I tell you that every step I took felt like I was pushing against something that didn't want me there, I need you to understand that this is not the kind of thing I normally say. This is not the kind of thing I ever thought I would say. But it's true. From the very first moment I stepped onto that hillside, something in my chest tightened up like a fist, closing around my heart, and it did not let go until I was 200 miles away, and even then, it only loosened. It didn't open. It still hasn't opened. I don't think it ever will. Danny didn't seem to notice anything. He was joking around, filming himself walking up the slope, doing that thing he always did where he'd narrate like he was hosting a nature documentary, saying things like, "And here we see the intrepid explorer approaching the legendary lost city of the Chisos, home to the ancient and mysterious mercury miners of old." Sophia wasn't joking. She walked ahead of us, with her shoulders set in a way that made me think she was listening for something. And every few steps, she'd stop and look around, and then keep walking. And I wanted to ask her what she was looking for, but I didn't, because I was afraid she'd tell me. We got to the first building around 1:30 in the afternoon. The sun was directly overhead, and it should have been hot. But it wasn't. There was this cool air coming from somewhere that I couldn't identify, and I remember thinking that was weird because we were exposed on the hillside, with no shade for 100 yards in any direction. The building was a store, Sophia said. That's where they sold supplies to the miners, and you could still see the counter inside, through the gap where the door used to be, this massive slab of wood that had somehow survived while everything around it rotted away. There were shelves on the walls that were empty, except for a few rusted cans that had bloated and burst decades ago. And on the floor, there were fragments of things, glass bottles and tin cups, and what looked like the remains of a leather boot, just the sole and part of the upper. The rest dissolved by time. I started filming. Danny was already inside, sweeping his camera around, and I stayed at the doorway getting wide shots. Sophia hung back, leaning against an outcrop of rock maybe 20 feet away, watching us but not joining in. I remember asking her if she was coming inside and she said no. I've been in there before, and something about the way she said it made me not want to push. So I just went in and started documenting, panning across the shelves, zooming in on the counter where you could still see grooves worn into the wood from years of use, focusing on the boot fragment because I thought it would make a good thumbnail for the video. That's when Danny said, "Hey, come look at this." He was at the back of the store where there was a door that led into a back room that must have been storage or living quarters or something. I went over and looked at what he was pointing at, and at first I didn't understand what I was seeing. There was writing on the wall. Not old writing, not painted there 100 years ago by miners or merchants. This was new. This was done in what looked like black marker or maybe some kind of grease pencil, and it said, in letters that sloped downward, like whoever wrote them couldn't keep their hands steady, "Don't go into 4. Danny looked at me and I looked at Danny, and we both looked at the words. And Danny said, "What's 4? And I said, "I don't know. Maybe one of the mine shafts." And Danny said, "We should ask Sophia." And I said, "Yeah, we should." So we went back outside and found Sophia right where we'd left her, and Danny showed her the picture on his camera screen and asked her what it meant. And she looked at it for a long time, without saying anything. And then she said, I don't know who wrote that." And I said, "Okay, but what's 4? And she said the shafts are numbered. The Chisos Mining Company numbered them, 1 through 7. 4 is the deepest one, goes down maybe 300 feet, and then spreads out into horizontal tunnels that follow the ore veins. And Danny said, "Cool, that's probably the one with the most interesting stuff then." And Sophia said, "You're not going into 4. She said it like that, just flat, no room for argument. Danny started to protest and she cut him off and said, "I'm serious. You can film the entrance, but you're not going in. I don't go in there, and neither do you." Danny asked why, and Sophia didn't answer. She just started walking up the hill toward the next cluster of buildings, and Danny looked at me like, "Can you believe this?" And I shrugged, because honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want to go into any of them. The feeling in my chest was getting tighter and tighter the higher we climbed, and I was already trying to figure out how I was going to make it through 2 nights here without having some kind of breakdown. We spent the next 3 hours exploring the surface. There was a lot to see. The superintendent's house was still mostly standing. 2 stories of stone and timber with a porch that sagged so badly it nearly touched the ground. And inside there was furniture. Actual furniture. A table and chairs, and a metal bed frame, and even a wood-burning stove that had rusted into a single solid mass. There was a blacksmith shop with the forge still intact, the bellows rotted to nothing, but the iron parts still recognizable. There was a row of smaller houses that the miners lived in, basically one-room shacks with no windows, and in one of them, there were still boots by the door. 3 pairs of work boots lined up like someone had just taken them off and was about to come back for them. That bothered me more than anything else we'd seen. Something about the boots. Something about how careful they were placed. The left and right of each pair perfectly parallel. The toes all pointing the same direction. Nobody leaves their boots like that if they're in a hurry. Nobody leaves their boots like that unless they're planning to come back. Sophia kept finding excuses to stay outside. She'd wait by a doorway or lean against a wall while Danny and I went inside and filmed. And she'd answer questions if we asked. But she didn't volunteer anything. And she kept looking around, kept scanning the hillside, and the mine entrances, and the rocks, kept pausing to listen to something I couldn't hear. Finally, around 4:30, I couldn't take it anymore, and I walked over to her, while Danny was filming inside one of the miners' shacks. And I said, "Okay, what's the deal? Why won't you go inside anywhere? What are you looking for?" And she looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding something. And then she said the Chisos Mining Company employed over 500 men at its peak. And I said, "Okay." And she said when the mercury market crashed in 1946, the company shut down operations basically overnight, just told everyone to go home and lock the gates. And I said, "Okay." And she said 83 of those men never left. I waited for her to explain, but she just kept looking at me. So I said, "What do you mean they never left? Like they died here?" And she said, "No. I mean they never left. Their names are in the records, as employed right up until the day the mine closed. There's no record of them being fired or quitting or dying. They just stop appearing in the documents. And when people came back years later to salvage equipment and assess the property, no one ever found them. No bodies, no graves, nothing. 83 men just gone." I said, "Well, they probably just walked out into the desert and scattered. Went to other towns, started new lives." And Sophia said, "Maybe." And I said, "But you don't think so?" And she said, "No, I don't think so." She didn't say anything else. We just stood there looking at the mine entrances, those black holes in the hillside that didn't reflect the sunlight the way they should have. And then Danny came out of the shack all excited about something he'd found. And the moment passed, but I didn't forget it. I couldn't forget it. 83 men. Gone. No trace. That number kept bouncing around my head like a marble in an empty room. And I kept looking at those mine shafts and thinking about what might be down there, what might have happened to those men. If they didn't walk out into the desert, if they went the other way, if they went down. We set up camp about 200 yards from the main cluster of buildings, in a flat area that looked like it might have been a parking lot or a staging area back when the mine was operational. There was a stone wall on one side that provided some windbreak and a clear view of the sky above us. And Sophia said this was where she always camped when she came here, far enough from the structures that you couldn't see their windows, close enough that you could get to your vehicle in a hurry if you needed to. I didn't like the way she said that last part, but I didn't say anything. I just helped Danny set up the tents and start a fire and heat up the canned chili we'd brought for dinner. The sun went down around 6:45. I know the exact time because I was looking at my phone when it happened. And I remember being surprised because it felt like it had been light for much longer than it should have been, like the afternoon had stretched past its normal boundaries. The moment the sun dipped below the ridgeline to the west, the temperature dropped by what felt like 20 degrees. The air that had been slightly cool became cold. Actually cold. Cold enough that I could see my breath when I exhaled. Danny noticed it too and said, "Dude, it's like 30 degrees colder all of a sudden." And Sophia just said, "Yeah, it does that here," and went back to eating her chili. We sat around the fire for a while after dinner. The stars came out, and this far from any light pollution, they were incredible. Just this blanket of white across the entire sky. More stars than I'd ever seen, even out in the Permian Basin where there's not much artificial light either. Danny was messing with one of the cameras, trying to get a time-lapse of the Milky Way, and I was just sitting there staring at the buildings in the distance, at the way they looked like empty eye sockets in the firelight. Dark holes where light used to be. Sophia was smoking another cigarette and not talking. And the three of us were quiet for a long time, just listening to the fire pop and the wind move through the rocks and the occasional distant sound of something we told ourselves was a coyote. Then Sophia said, "Did you hear that?" And we both said, "Hear what?" And she said, "Listen." So we listened. At first, I didn't hear anything. Just the wind, just the fire, just my own heartbeat, which was suddenly a lot louder than it should have been. But then, under all of that, like a sound you've been hearing the whole time but only just noticed, there was something else. A rhythm, a pattern, something that repeated every few seconds with a regularity that couldn't be natural, that couldn't be wind or animals or settling rocks. It took me maybe 30 seconds to identify it, to match it to something in my memory. And when I did, my whole body went cold, in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the sound of metal on stone. Distant, muffled, like it was coming from underground, but unmistakable. The same sound a pickaxe makes when it hits rock, over and over. A steady, working rhythm. Someone was mining. Someone was down there in one of those shafts in the pitch black at 7:30 at night, in a mine that had been abandoned for almost 80 years. And they were mining. Danny looked at me and his face was pale in the firelight and he said, "That's not possible." And I said, "I know." And Sophia just kept staring at the mine entrances up the hill and didn't say anything. The sound kept going. Pick. Pause. Pick. pause. Sometimes there'd be a longer pause, like whoever was swinging was taking a breath or adjusting their grip. And then it would start again. And here's the thing that made it worse. Here's the thing that made me want to get in the truck right then and drive until I hit pavement. It wasn't just one sound. It was multiple. Once I started listening, really listening, I could hear layers. One pickaxe hitting stone, and then another, slightly out of sync, and then another, and another, like a work crew, like a whole shift of miners down there in the dark, swinging their tools against rock that had been mined out 70 years ago. Sophia stood up and ground her cigarette out under her boot and said we should get some sleep. And Danny said, "Are you kidding me? We need to film this. This is incredible." And Sophia said, "No, we're not going up there tonight. Whatever that is, stays up there. And we stay down here. And in the morning, we can talk about it. But not tonight." Danny started arguing with her. And I just sat there listening to the picks, counting them, trying to figure out how many there were. I got to 6 distinct rhythms before I lost track and had to start over. 6 pickaxes, 6 miners, working in the dark, in a mine where 83 men disappeared without a trace. I don't remember deciding to go to bed. I don't remember getting into my sleeping bag or zipping up the tent or saying goodnight to anyone. I just remember lying there in the dark, staring at the nylon ceiling of my tent, listening to the picking and picking and picking, and knowing that I wasn't going to sleep, that there was no way I was going to sleep, that I was going to lie here until dawn. And then I was going to suggest very calmly that we pack up and leave, because this was too weird, and I didn't want to be here anymore. That was my plan. That was what I was going to do. I must have fallen asleep anyway, because the next thing I remember is waking up and the picking had stopped, and my phone said it was 2:47 in the morning, and the silence was somehow worse than the sound had been. Complete silence. No wind. No animals. No fire crackling because the fire had burned down to nothing. Just this thick, heavy silence that felt like a physical presence. Like something sitting on my chest. Like the air itself had solidified and was pressing down on everything. I lay there for a while just listening, trying to hear the picking again. Almost wanting to hear it because at least then I'd know where it was coming from. At least then I'd know the direction to stay away from. But there was nothing. Just silence. And then, after what might have been 5 minutes or might have been an hour, I heard something else. Footsteps. Not inside the camp. Not right outside my tent. But up the hill. In the direction of the buildings. Multiple sets of footsteps on the rocky ground, moving in unison. Moving in a way that didn't sound like walking so much as marching. A regular cadence like soldiers or work crews or chain gangs. And under the footsteps, a sound that I couldn't identify at first. A kind of metallic clinking that came and went with each step. And then I realized what it was. Tools. They were carrying tools. Pickaxes and shovels and pry bars. Metal objects clanking against each other as they walked. I wanted to look. I wanted to unzip my tent and stick my head out and see what was making those sounds. But I couldn't move, not because I was paralyzed by fear, though I was terrified, but because something in me, some instinct that I didn't know I had, was screaming at me to stay still, to not draw attention, to make myself as small and quiet as possible and wait for it to pass. So that's what I did. I lay there in my sleeping bag, barely breathing, listening to the footsteps move across the hillside, above our camp. They were going toward the mines. I could track their progress by the sound, first far to my left, then directly above, then moving to the right, getting closer to the shaft entrances. And as they got closer to the mines, I heard something else, something that made my throat close up, and my eyes start to water. Because I knew what it meant, even though I didn't want to know. I heard a voice. Not words, not a language I recognized, but a voice. Someone speaking in a low, rhythmic tone, like a call, or a chant, or a prayer, and other voices responding. A chorus of voices answering in the same tone, the same rhythm, the same words I couldn't understand. Then the voices stopped, and there was a sound, like a door closing, a heavy, resonant thunk that vibrated through the ground beneath my sleeping bag. And then silence again. Complete, absolute silence. The kind that makes your ears ring because they're not designed for that much nothing. I didn't sleep again that night. I just lay there waiting for dawn, watching the darkness above me slowly turn gray, and then pale blue, and then gold as the sun came up over the ridge. When it was light enough to see, I unzipped my tent and looked around. Danny's tent was still closed. Sophia's tent was still closed. The fire pit was cold ash. Everything looked exactly like it had when we'd gone to bed. But there were footprints all around the camp, in a circle maybe 20 feet out from where our tents were set up. There were footprints in the rocky soil, hundreds of them, overlapping, going in both directions, like people had been walking around us all night, circling, watching. The prints were strange, not shaped quite like regular boot prints, more like, I don't know how to describe this, more like the foot inside the boot had been deformed somehow. The arch too high, the toe too wide, something about the pressure distribution that didn't look right. And in some places, in the prints that were clearest, I could see what looked like rust stains, reddish-brown marks like whoever made these prints had been stepping in something wet and red. I didn't wake the others. I don't know why. I think I was afraid that if I said something out loud, if I acknowledged what I was seeing, it would become more real. It would cement itself into reality in a way I couldn't undo. So I just walked around the perimeter of the camp, looking at the footprints and trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Maybe we'd been walking in our sleep. Maybe animals had made tracks that just happened to look like boots. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Sophia came out of her tent around 7, and she looked at the footprints, and she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded like she'd expected this, and said we should eat and pack up and film what we came to film and leave before noon. I asked her why before noon, and she said because whatever uses those minds uses them at night, and during the day it sleeps. And as long as we're gone before dark, we'll be fine. I asked her how she knew that, and she said because I've been coming here for 15 years and that's how it's always been. And I asked her why she kept coming back if she knew something was here. And she looked at me with those lined, weathered eyes and said, because I'm trying to understand what happened to those 83 men. And because I don't think they're dead. I think they're still here, and I need to know what that means. Danny came out and saw the footprints and freaked out. He wanted to follow them. He wanted to see where they led. He wanted to film everything and turn this into the biggest video our channel had ever posted. Sophia and I both said no. Absolutely not. We're filming the buildings from the outside during daylight, and that's it. And Danny argued, but he was outnumbered. We ate granola bars in silence and packed up most of our gear. And then we walked back up the hill toward the buildings with our cameras and our tripod, and the sun hot on our backs. And I kept looking at the footprints around the camp, at how many there were, at how long whoever made them must have been walking in circles while we slept. The buildings looked different in daylight. More mundane, more like regular ruins, instead of the ominous shapes they'd been the night before. But the feeling was still there. That pressure in my chest that had started the moment I set foot on this hillside. And if anything, it was worse now because I knew things I hadn't known before, because the sounds and the footsteps and the voice I'd heard in the dark were not something I could explain away anymore. Sophia led us up toward the mine entrances, past the store and the superintendent's house and the blacksmith shop, up a path that had been worn into the rock by 100 years of boots and cartwheels, and who knows what else. The entrance to shaft number 4 was the largest. It was maybe 15 feet wide and 10 feet tall, reinforced with timber beams that had somehow survived decades of exposure, and the darkness inside was the blackest darkness I've ever seen. Not just absence of light, but something that seemed to actively absorb light, that pulled at the edges of the sunlight and didn't let it penetrate more than a few feet. The other shaft entrances were similar, just holes in the hillside with that same hungry darkness inside them. But 4 was the one Sophia wouldn't stop looking at, the one she'd told us not to enter, The one with the warning written on the wall of the store. Don't go into 4. I was filming the entrance when Danny walked past me. I didn't even realize what he was doing until he was already inside. His headlamp on. The beam swallowed by the dark. Almost immediately. I yelled at him to come back, and he yelled back something I couldn't understand, and then his light disappeared around a corner, and he was gone. Sophia didn't move. She just stood there looking at the entrance like she was waiting for something. And I stood there with my camera rolling, not knowing what to do. About 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. I could hear Danny's footsteps echoing from inside, getting fainter as he went deeper. Sophia finally said, "We have to go get him." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And neither of us moved. The darkness in that entrance was doing something to me. Something I can't fully explain. It was making me not want to move. Making me want to stand very still and not draw attention to myself. The same instinct I'd had in my tent the night before. But I pushed through it. I turned on my headlamp and I walked into the mine. The smell hit me first. Mercury. That sharp, metallic, almost sweet smell that I later learned is a sign that the concentration in the air is dangerously high. I should have turned back right then. Mercury vapor can cause permanent neurological damage, kidney failure, death. But I was thinking about Danny, about my best friend since high school, about the guy who got me into this in the first place, and I kept walking. The tunnel went straight for maybe 100 feet and then branched. There were rails on the ground for ore carts, rusted to almost nothing but still recognizable, and wooden supports every few feet that creaked when I touched them. The walls were wet, with something that reflected my headlamp beam in strange colors. Not the reddish-brown of rust, but something more iridescent, blues and greens and purples that seemed to shift as I moved. I could hear Danny somewhere ahead of me, his footsteps and his voice, but I couldn't tell which tunnel he'd taken. The acoustics were strange in here, sounds coming from everywhere and nowhere. I picked the left tunnel and started following it, and after maybe 50 feet, I realized something was wrong. The tunnel was sloping downward, which made sense. This was a mine after all, but it was also curving in a way that didn't match the map Sophia had shown us. The main shafts were supposed to be relatively straight, following the ore veins, but this was spiraling, turning back on itself, and I had the sudden, horrible realization that I had no idea which direction the entrance was anymore. I kept walking because I didn't know what else to do. The tunnel got narrower, the ceiling got lower, the smell got stronger, and the temperature, which should have been getting warmer the deeper I went because that's how mines work, was getting colder. Not just cool, not just comfortable, but cold. Cold enough that my breath was fogging in the beam of my headlamp. Cold enough that my fingers were going numb inside my work gloves. Then I heard it. Behind me. Close. The sound of metal on stone. I spun around and there was nothing there. Just the tunnel stretching back the way I'd come. Empty. Silent. But the sound kept going. Pick. Pause. Pick. Pause. Coming from somewhere I couldn't see. Somewhere that might have been ahead of me or behind me, or above me, or below me. The acoustics made it impossible to tell. I stood there with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples, trying to figure out which way to go, which way was safe, which way would lead me back to the surface, and the sun, and the real world. That's when my headlamp flickered. Not a dying battery flicker. I'd put fresh batteries in that morning. This was something else. Like interference. Like something was disrupting the signal between my brain and my hand in the light. It flickered once, twice, 3 times. And on the third flicker, I saw something in the darkness ahead of me that I will never forget, that I see every time I close my eyes, that has ruined sleep for me for the rest of my life. It was a shape. Human-sized, but not human-shaped. The proportions were wrong. The limbs too long, the head too small. The body hunched in a way that suggested the spine was curved, in places spines shouldn't curve. It was maybe 30 feet away, standing in the tunnel, facing me. And when my light came back on, It didn't move. It just stood there, watching, with eyes that caught my headlamp beam and reflected it back in a color I can't describe. Not red, like animal eyes. Not green. Something else. Something that didn't exist in any spectrum I'd ever seen. And then it turned and walked away down the tunnel, moving in that same shuffling gait I'd heard the night before. Its arms swinging in a rhythm that matched the picking sound that was still echoing from somewhere. And I stood there frozen until my legs gave out. And I sat down hard on the tunnel floor. And I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only sit there and wait for it to come back and do whatever it was going to do to me. It didn't come back. The picking sound faded. My headlamp stayed on. And after what might have been 5 minutes, or might have been an hour, I heard Sophia calling my name from somewhere behind me. I don't remember how I got out. I don't remember the walk back to the entrance, or the moment I stepped into sunlight, or the conversation we had afterward. The next thing I clearly remember is sitting in the bed of Danny's truck with a bottle of water in my hand, my whole body shaking. Sophia standing in front of me, saying my name over and over like she was trying to wake me from a dream. Danny was there too. He was fine. He'd gotten lost in the tunnels, he said. Turned around in the dark. But he'd found his way out another entrance, one of the smaller shafts further down the hillside. He said he hadn't seen anything. He said he hadn't heard anything. He said he didn't understand why we were so freaked out. This was exactly the kind of content we'd come here to get, wasn't it? When I tried to tell him what I'd seen, he looked at me like I was crazy and said maybe I'd breathed too much mercury vapor. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I needed to drink some water and calm down. Sophia didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those weathered eyes and nodded slowly, like she understood, like she'd seen it too. Maybe not the same thing, but something like it. Something that lived in those tunnels and had been there for a long time and wasn't a ghost and wasn't human and wasn't anything anyone had ever put a name to. We left. We packed up our gear and drove back down the dirt road and didn't stop until we hit pavement. Danny dropped Sophia at her Jeep and she gave me her number and said, "Call me if you need to talk." And I said, "Okay," but I never called because I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to forget it. I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. Here's the thing though. Here's the part I haven't told anyone, not Sophia, not Danny, not my mom, when she asked why I came home a day early with a look on my face like I'd seen something die. Here's the part that keeps me up at night, that makes me record this confession at 3 in the morning instead of sleeping like a normal person. I lost 2 days. We got back to Fort Stockton around 4 in the afternoon after leaving Terlingua. I remember that clearly. I remember the stripes where we stopped for gas. I remember the sunset over the oil fields as we drove north on 285. I remember Danny dropping me off at my apartment around 9 and saying we should go through the footage tomorrow. I remember going inside and taking a shower and lying down on my bed. The next thing I remember is waking up on Tuesday, not Saturday night, when we got back. Not Sunday morning. Tuesday. 2 full days gone. My phone said October 24th, 11:37 a.m. There were texts from Danny asking if I was okay, saying he'd been trying to reach me for 2 days. There were missed calls from my mom. There was an email from my boss asking why I hadn't shown up for work Monday. I don't know what happened during those 2 days. I've tried to remember. I've tried so hard to reconstruct what I did, where I went, who I talked to. But there's nothing, just a blank space where 48 hours should be. And here's the thing that really scares me. Here's the thing that makes me want to scream sometimes. I had bruises on my arms, on my legs, on my back, like I'd been walking through something, climbing through something, crawling through something. And on my hands, on my palms, there were calluses that hadn't been there before. Fresh calluses. The kind you get from gripping something hard for a long time. Like the handle of a pickaxe. I still hear it sometimes. The picking. The sound of metal on stone. It comes at night. Usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. And it sounds like it's coming from right underneath me. From the foundation of my apartment building. From somewhere deep in the earth below. I know it's not real. I know it can't be real. Terlingua is 400 miles away. And whatever is in those mines can't reach me here. but I hear it anyway. And sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, right on the edge of unconsciousness, I smell it too. That sharp, sweet, metallic smell. Mercury. Like it's in my lungs. Like it's in my blood. Like I brought something back with me that's never going to leave. I don't work night shifts anymore. I asked my boss to put me on day crew only. And he did it, without asking why. Because I think he could tell something was wrong with me. Something had changed. I don't go into basements or tunnels or anywhere underground. I sold my caving equipment. I deleted all the footage from Terlingua without watching it. Because I'm afraid of what I might see. What might have been recorded during those 2 days. I can't remember. Danny's gone. Not dead. Just gone. He moved to Colorado about a month after we got back. Said he needed a change of scenery. Said Texas was starting to feel too small. We talked on the phone a few times, but he never wanted to discuss what happened. He just kept saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. And eventually he stopped returning my calls. I check his social media sometimes and he seems fine, posting pictures of mountains and ski slopes and smiling with new friends, and I wonder if he really doesn't remember or if he's just better at pretending than I am. Sophia texts me every few weeks, just checking in, making sure I'm okay. She never asks about the details, never pushes me to talk about it. She just sends a message that says, "Still here?" And I send one back that says, "Still here too," and that's it. I think she's the only person in the world who really understands what I went through, what I might still be going through. And sometimes I think about driving down to Terlingua to see her, to ask her all the questions I didn't ask when I had the chance. But I can't. I can't go back there. I can't even drive south of Fort Stockton without my hands starting to shake. The last thing I want to tell you is this. About 3 weeks ago, I got a letter. A physical letter, mailed to my apartment. No return address. The envelope was old, like it had been sitting somewhere for a long time before someone finally sent it. The paper inside was even older, yellowed and brittle, with handwriting in faded ink that was hard to read. It was a list. Names. 83 names, handwritten in what looked like a ledger, dated November 1946. The 83 men who never left. And at the bottom of the list, in newer ink, in handwriting that looked just like mine, was my name, Wade Trevino. And next to it, a number, 4. I don't know what it means. I don't know how it got there. I don't know if I wrote it during those 2 missing days, or if something else wrote it for me. But I keep that list in my wallet now, folded up so I don't have to look at it. And sometimes at night, when the picking starts and the smell of mercury fills my nose, and I feel like I'm going crazy, I take it out and I look at my name, and I try to remember what happened in that mine. What I saw, what I did, what I became. Because I think the truth is that I never left. I think some part of me is still down there in shaft number 4, walking those spiral tunnels, breathing that poisoned air, swinging a pickaxe against rock that's been mined out for 80 years. I think whatever took those 83 men took me too, and the person sitting in this apartment recording this confession is just what walked out. Just the shell they let go because they didn't need it anymore. And every night, when the picking starts, I think they're calling me back. I think one day I'm gonna wake up and I'll be on that dirt road in my truck, driving toward those black holes in the hillside, and I won't be able to stop. I won't want to stop, because I'm already one of them. I just haven't accepted it yet, but I will. Sooner or later. Everyone accepts it eventually. That's what Sophia told me. The last time I saw her, standing at the edge of the camp, with those footprints circling around us. Everyone goes back. Everyone answers when the mountain calls. I think the mountain is calling me right now. I think it's been calling me since the moment I set foot on that hillside. And I don't know how much longer I can pretend I'm not listening. My name's Wade Trevino. I'm from Wink, Texas. And I work as a cable line installer. And I'm telling you this because if you're ever in Big Bend, if you're ever on 170 heading toward Lajitas, and you see a dirt road that winds up into the Chisos foothills, if you see the sign that says danger in faded red letters, don't turn. Don't follow it. Don't let your curiosity take you up that slope toward those buildings with their empty windows and the mine shafts with their hungry darkness. Because whatever is in there, whatever took those 83 men, whatever took me, it's patient. It's been there for 100 years. Maybe longer. It can wait. It will wait. And when you go down into shaft number 4, when you breathe that poisoned air and hear those picks swinging in the dark, you'll understand. You were always supposed to be here. You just didn't know it yet. The picking is starting again. I have to go. My name's Jesse Moreno. I'm from Pecos out past the interstate where the oil derricks pump all night, and I work as a diesel mechanic at one of the transport yards off Highway 285. Used to work, I should say. Because I don't do much of anything anymore except sit on my uncle's porch in Midland and try to stop my hands from shaking long enough to hold a cup of coffee. That's where I am right now, actually. It's 3 in the morning and everyone else is asleep and I'm sitting out here in the dark like an idiot because I can't be inside when it's quiet like this. The walls feel too close. I keep thinking I hear wings, but I need to tell someone what happened because my wife won't talk about it and my daughter won't talk about it. And my brother, well, my brother can't talk about anything anymore and the police don't believe us. And I'm starting to think I made the whole thing up, except I know I didn't. Because Tomas is gone, and I watched him get taken. And there's nothing in my life that makes sense anymore. Okay. I need to start from the beginning because otherwise this is just going to sound like the ramblings of someone who lost his mind out in West Texas, which, you know what? Maybe I did. Maybe that's exactly what happened. But even if I'm crazy now, I wasn't crazy that morning when we left Pecos. I was just a guy trying to get his family to his grandmother's birthday in El Paso because she was turning 92 and she specifically asked for all of us to be there. Said it might be her last one. And my mom had guilt-tripped me so hard that I agreed to drive even though my Tahoe had been making this weird clicking sound for about a week that I kept meaning to look at but never did because I'm a mechanic. And that's the irony, right? I fix other people's vehicles all day and then ignore my own until something goes wrong. It was September 14th. I remember because that's the day after my daughter Marisol's 15th birthday. And she was still wearing the little silver bracelet Elena got her, kept touching it every few minutes like she couldn't believe she had something that nice. We left the house at about 6:30 in the morning because I wanted to beat the heat. Elena made breakfast tacos the night before and wrapped them in foil, and I ate 2 of them in the truck before we even got on the road. One with eggs and chorizo and one with just beans and cheese because I was trying to watch my cholesterol, but not that hard. I was wearing this gray work shirt I usually wore on weekends. The one with the small tear on the left sleeve from when I caught it on a fence post. And my old Dickies work pants. The brown ones. And my boots that I'd had for going on 6 years now. I remember what I was wearing because I still have those clothes and I can't wear them anymore. They're in a garbage bag. In the corner of my room. And I keep meaning to throw them away. But I also can't touch them. Tomas was in the back seat with Marisol. My brother Tomas. He was 3 years younger than me. 31. Worked at the same yard, actually. But on the loading side. Not the mechanic bay. He'd come down from Odessa the night before to ride with us because his car was in the shop, something wrong with the transmission. And he figured he'd just catch a ride back with us after the party. He was wearing a Houston Astros cap that was so faded you could barely read it anymore, and this blue t-shirt with some fishing logo on it, Bass Pro or something. I don't remember exactly. He was in a good mood that morning. Kept making jokes about how Abuela was going to pinch his cheeks and ask why he wasn't married yet, and how he was going to eat his weight in tamales. Marisol was laughing at him because she thought he was the funniest person alive, always had, ever since she was little, and he used to chase her around the yard pretending to be a monster. I need to stop for a second. I need to... Hold on. Okay, I'm fine. So we're on the road, right, and everything is normal. The sun's coming up over the desert, and it's that orange color that makes everything look like a painting. And Elena's got the radio on low. Some Spanish station playing old ballads. And I'm just driving and thinking about nothing in particular. The plan was to take Interstate 10 most of the way because it's the fastest. Even though Tomas kept saying we should take the back roads through the mountains because it was prettier. And I kept telling him we didn't have time for pretty. We needed to be there by noon for the party. But then we got past Van Horn, and that's when I heard it. This grinding sound coming from somewhere under the hood. Not loud at first. Just this little metal-on-metal whine that made me wince, because I knew exactly what that sound meant. It meant I should have looked at the truck last week, like I kept telling myself I would. I pulled over to the shoulder and popped the hood, and yeah, it was exactly what I thought it was. The belt tensioner was going, and it had already started chewing up the serpentine belt. I could see the fraying. Normally, that's not the end of the world. I carry tools in the back, and I could probably rig something temporary. But the tensioner itself was cracked, and I didn't have a spare for that. No way that truck was making it another 100 miles to El Paso without throwing the belt completely and leaving us stranded with no power steering and no alternator. I told Elena we needed to find a parts store. She asked how far the next town was. I looked at my phone and there was no signal. That far out, between Van Horn and the border, there's stretches where you just don't get anything. I knew that. I should have thought about that before we left. I got back in the truck and we kept driving, slow, listening to that grinding sound get a little worse with every mile. Tomas was up in his seat now, looking worried. And Marisol had stopped touching her bracelet and was just staring out the window at all that nothing. There's so much nothing out there, man. Just scrubland and rock. And these twisted little bushes that look dead even when they're alive. And the sky so big, it makes you feel like an ant. We passed a sign that said, Lobo Station, 12 miles, and I figured that was our best bet. I remembered hearing about Lobo when I was a kid, some old railroad town that dried up when the trains stopped coming. But I thought maybe there'd at least be a gas station or something, someone with a phone I could use to call for a tow. But when we got there, man, when we got there was nothing. I mean, there were buildings, sure, but they were all empty. Just these old adobe and wood structures, some of them collapsed, some of them barely standing. And this one main road that used to be the town's only street. No cars anywhere. No people. No gas station. Nothing but the ruins of a place that died 50, 60 years ago, and nobody bothered to clean up. I pulled the truck to the side of the road where there used to be a general store. I think because there was this faded sign that I couldn't read anymore, and I got out and just stood there looking at this ghost town and thinking, okay, Jesse, you're an idiot. You should have checked the truck, you should have brought a sat phone, you should have taken the interstate all the way and not thought you could make it. Elena got out too, and she was already on her phone trying to get a signal. Walking around with it held up over her head like that would help. It didn't. Tomas climbed out the back and stretched and said something like, man, this place is creepy. And Marisol stayed in the truck with her arms crossed, annoyed because she was 15, and this was not how she wanted to spend the day after her birthday. I told everyone I was going to walk around, see if maybe someone still lived out here. Maybe there was a house with a landline or something. Elena said she'd come with me. Tomas said he'd stay with Marisol and keep trying to get a signal. So Elena and I walked down that main road, past these empty buildings, with their windows all dark, and I kept looking for any sign of life. A car, a generator, laundry on a line, anything. But there was nothing. The whole town was dead. I mean dead. Not just abandoned, but I don't know how to explain it. It felt wrong. Like the air itself was heavier there. Like we were trespassing somewhere we weren't supposed to be. Wait, no, I need to back up because I forgot to mention something important. When we first drove into town, before I even pulled over, I saw this church at the far end of the road. At least I think it was a church. It had that shape, you know, with a little steeple on top. But part of the roof had caved in, and the steeple was leaning like it was about to fall. There was no cross anymore, just the shape of where a cross used to be, like a shadow or a scar. And I remember looking at it and feeling this coldness in my chest, even though it was at least 90 degrees outside. This feeling like something bad had happened there and the building remembered. I know that sounds stupid. Buildings don't remember things. But I'm telling you what I felt. Okay, I'm not making this up for some podcast or trying to write a scary story. I'm just telling you what happened. So Elena and I walked up the main road and back again. Must have taken 20 minutes. And we found exactly nothing. A few of the buildings still had furniture in them, old chairs and tables covered in dust, and one of them had these shelves that used to hold canned goods, I think, but were empty now. Just thick dust and a few rusted cans that looked like they'd been there since the 70s. No people, no phones, no way to contact anyone. We got back to the truck, and Tomas was leaning against the tailgate with this look on his face, and he said, "Jess, come here. You gotta see this." I walked over and he pointed at his phone screen, which was open to the map app, and he said he'd finally gotten one bar for about 30 seconds. And he looked up where we were, and the closest town in any direction was Valentine, about 40 miles back the way we came. There was nothing ahead for at least 60 miles. And the truck, with that belt the way it was, there was no way. I popped the hood again and looked at it. Really looked at it this time. And it was worse than I thought. The belt was starting to shred on one side. I could maybe get another 10 miles out of it if I drove slow. But then what? We'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere instead of stranded in a ghost town that at least had structures. I told everyone. We needed to stay put. Wait for someone to drive through. It was a road, right? Eventually someone had to come by. Elena asked how long that might take, and I lied and said probably just a few hours. Some rancher or somebody would pass through. But I knew better. I'd driven this road before. Sometimes you could go the whole day without seeing another car. It was about 1 in the afternoon by then, and the sun was at its worst. We sat in the truck with the engine off, windows down, trying to stay cool. But it was brutal. Marisol was complaining. Not in a mean way. Just in that way teenagers do when they're uncomfortable and bored and scared, but don't want to admit they're scared. Elena was trying to stay positive, talking about how we'd have a great story to tell at the party when we finally got there. How Abuela would laugh and say that's what you get for not taking care of your truck. Mijo. Tomas was quiet, which wasn't like him. He kept looking out the window at those empty buildings, at that church at the end of the road, and I could tell something was bothering him, but I didn't ask because I was feeling it too and I didn't want to talk about it. By about 4 o'clock, the sun was starting to go down and I made a decision. I told everyone we should find somewhere to shelter for the night because driving back in the dark with that belt ready to snap was too risky. We'd wait until morning when it was cooler, see if the lower temperature helped the belt somehow. And if not, we'd just start walking back toward Van Horn and hope we got a signal before we got heat stroke. Elena didn't like that plan, but she didn't have a better one. Tomas said we should check out the church because at least part of the roof was still standing and it would give us shade. Marisol said she wasn't going in there because it looked like a horror movie, and I almost laughed, except I agreed with her. But we went anyway. What choice did we have? The church was at the end of the road, past a few more crumbling buildings. And as we got closer, I noticed things I hadn't seen from a distance. The front doors were still there, but they were open, just hanging on rusted hinges. And through the doorway, I could see pews still lined up inside, covered in dust and debris from the collapsed roof. There was no floor in some places, just dirt, and the walls had this water damage that had made the plaster bubble and crack in these weird patterns. But the back half of the church, under where the steeple was leaning, that part was still mostly intact. The roof there was holding. There was even a small altar still standing, though any religious items had long been stripped away. Just the wooden frame of the altar, and nothing on it. We went inside, stepping over chunks of ceiling and broken glass, and I kept looking up at that leaning steeple through the hole in the roof, thinking, if that thing comes down on us, we're done. But it had been leaning like that for decades, probably. It wasn't coming down tonight. Probably. I had a blanket in the truck and a small cooler with some water bottles and the rest of the breakfast tacos from that morning. So I went back and got those, while Elena and Tomas cleared a space on the floor for us to sit. Marisol refused to come inside at first, said she'd wait in the truck. But Elena told her no. We're staying together. And she finally came in with her arms crossed, and this look on her face, like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. I didn't blame her. By the time the sun went down completely, we were settled into the back of that church, sitting on the blanket, eating cold tacos and drinking water, and pretending everything was fine. Tomas had calmed down a little and was making jokes again. Something about how this would make a great campfire story someday. And Marisol even laughed once, which made Elena smile, which made me feel like maybe we could get through this. Just one night in a weird place, and then we'd figure it out in the morning. Then the sun was gone. And I mean really gone. Out there, that far from any city. When the sun goes down, it gets dark in a way that city people don't understand. The kind of dark where you can't see your hand in front of your face. We had our phones for light, but we were trying to save the batteries. So we mostly just sat in the dark and listened to the wind coming through the holes in the roof and tried to sleep. That's when I first heard it. It was, how do I explain this? It was a sound like wings, but not bird wings. Not like the fluttering you hear when a pigeon takes off or whatever. This was heavier, slower, like someone was shaking out a heavy blanket somewhere in the sky above us. And it was close. Not directly overhead, but close. Like something was circling. I sat up and I grabbed Elena's arm, and she was already awake. I could feel how tense she was. And Tomas said, "Do you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah." And Marisol said, "What is that?" And nobody answered. Because nobody knew. The sound went around the church. I could track it with my ears. This slow circling. And then it stopped. Just stopped. And there was this moment of silence that was worse than the sound, where I was just sitting there in the dark, straining to hear anything. And then there was this call. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like a bird, but not. It was low and long. And it had this quality to it. This human quality. Like someone trying to imitate an owl, but not quite getting it right. It made the hair on my arms stand up. It made my teeth hurt. Marisol whispered, "Was that an owl?" And I said, "Yeah, it's just an owl." Even though I knew it wasn't. I'd heard owls my whole life growing up out here. I'd heard great horned owls and barn owls and screech owls, and this was not that. This was something else. The sound came again, closer this time, and I could hear the wings now too, not circling anymore but descending. Like whatever it was had decided to land. I looked toward the open doorway of the church, and I could see, I swear to God I could see, a shape against the starlight, which was the only light there was. There was a shape in the doorway that was too big to be a person. It was at least 7 feet tall, and it was wide, wider than any person, and the silhouette was wrong. The head was too round and too big, and there were these shapes on either side that I think were wings. But they were folded, and they made it look like a person in a cloak. Except it wasn't. You could tell it wasn't. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I don't think any of us could. We just sat there in the dark, looking at this thing in the doorway and waiting for it to do something. And it didn't do anything. It just stood there for at least a minute, maybe 2. It just stood there in the doorway, and I could feel it looking at us, even though I couldn't see its eyes. I could feel its attention the way you can feel heat from a fire. Then it was gone. I don't mean it walked away. I don't mean it flew away. 1 second it was there, and the next second the doorway was empty. And there was the sound of wings again. That heavy flapping, receding into the sky. And then nothing. Just the wind and our breathing and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Elena said, "Jesse, what was that?" And her voice was shaking so bad she could barely get the words out. I said, "I don't know." Tomas said, "We need to get out of here. We need to get to the truck." And that's when Marisol started crying. Not loud crying. Just these quiet tears that I could hear more than see. And I moved over to her and put my arm around her, and she was shaking so hard it felt like she was vibrating. I told everyone to stay calm. I said maybe it was just a big bird, a vulture or something. They can get pretty big out here, and I knew that was a lie. Because vultures don't stand upright like that, and they don't make that sound, and they don't feel like that when they look at you. But I said it anyway because I didn't know what else to say. We didn't sleep. Nobody slept. We just sat there in the dark for hours, listening, waiting for that sound to come back. And it did. It came back 3 more times before dawn. Each time we'd hear the wings first. That slow circling. And then that call, that wrong sound that was like an owl and like a woman and like nothing I'd ever heard before. And then silence. Each time I expected it to appear in the doorway again, but it didn't. It was circling. That's what I think now. It was circling us the way a bird circles its prey, waiting for us to make a mistake. When the sun finally came up, I almost cried with relief. We all got up and went outside, and the town looked the same as before. Just these empty buildings under that brutal morning light, and there was nothing in the sky except a few clouds way out on the horizon. I walked around the church and looked for, I don't know, feathers or tracks or something. Any evidence that what we'd experienced had been real. And I found something. Behind the church, in the dirt, there were these marks. 3 toes pointing forward and 1 pointing back, like a bird's foot. But each toe was at least 8 inches long. Whatever made those prints was huge. I showed Tomas, and he didn't say anything. He just looked at the prints, and then looked at me. And I could see in his eyes that he was thinking the same thing I was thinking, which was that we needed to get out of there right now. Belt or no belt, we needed to go. We went back to the truck and I tried starting it, and it started fine, which was a relief. And I put it in gear and we started driving. I went slow, listening to that grinding sound, praying the belt would hold. We got maybe a mile out of town and there was this, I don't know how to describe it. There was this impact. Something hit the roof of the truck. Hard enough to dent the metal. I slammed on the brakes and everyone screamed, and I looked up through the windshield, and there it was, sitting on the hood of my truck. In the daylight, I could see it now, and I wish I couldn't. It was, God help me, it was like an owl. It had feathers, dark brown or black, and it had a face like an owl, with those big round eyes, and that hooked beak. But it was the size of a person, bigger than a person. Its body was crouched on the hood of my truck, and its wings were spread for balance, and it was looking at us through the windshield with these eyes that were, they weren't bird eyes. I don't know what they were. They were yellow, like owl eyes. But there was something in them. Intelligence, malice, patience. It was studying us the way a cat studies a mouse. Nobody moved. I didn't even breathe. My foot was still on the brake, and my hands were on the wheel, and I was just looking at this thing, and it was looking at me. I could hear Elena praying under her breath, just this whispered stream of Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío over and over. And I could hear Marisol crying in the back seat. Tomas said, very quietly, don't move. Nobody move. The thing tilted its head, like it understood him, like it was curious about what he'd said. And then it opened its beak and made that sound again, that call. But this time it was right there, right in front of us. And it was so loud it hurt my ears. It was the sound of something that should not exist making itself known. Then it spread its wings fully. They must have been 12 feet across. I'm not exaggerating. They blocked out the whole windshield. Just this wall of dark feathers, and then it launched itself into the air with a force that rocked the truck sideways. I watched it climb into the sky, those massive wings beating slow and steady. And it turned and started circling, just like the night before, circling us. I floored it. I didn't care about the belt anymore. I just floored it, and the truck lurched forward, and we were going 50, 60 miles an hour on a road that was meant for maybe 35. And I could hear the grinding get worse and worse, and I didn't care. I could see the thing in my rearview mirror, still circling, but it was falling behind. We were outrunning it. We made it maybe 5 more miles. The belt snapped, with a sound like a gunshot, and suddenly I had no power steering and no charging, and the truck started slowing down no matter how hard I pushed the pedal. I managed to guide it to the side of the road before it died completely, and then we were just sitting there, in the middle of nowhere, with that thing somewhere behind us. I got out and looked back the way we'd come. I couldn't see it anymore. The sky was clear. Maybe it had given up. Maybe it only hunted in that town, in its territory, and we were outside of it now. I tried to believe that. I really tried. Tomas got out too, and he was already looking at the engine, even though there was nothing we could do without a new belt and tensioner, and I appreciated him for trying. Elena stayed in the truck with Marisol, and I could hear them talking through the open window. Elena saying calming things, and Marisol saying she wanted to go home, and Elena saying, "We will, baby, we will." That's when I heard the wings again. I looked up, and there it was, high up, maybe 1,000 feet, just a dark speck against the blue sky, but circling, still circling. It had followed us. Tomas saw it too, and he said a word I won't repeat, and then he said, "Jess, what do we do?" And I didn't have an answer. What could we do? We couldn't run. We couldn't hide. There was nothing out there but scrubland and rock, and that thing in the sky, watching, waiting. I told everyone to get back in the truck. I figured at least we had the metal of the truck between us and that thing. Maybe it couldn't get to us if we stayed inside. But that was stupid, and I knew it even as I thought it because I'd felt how hard it hit the roof before. Felt the dent it left. And if it really wanted to get in, it would get in. We sat there for hours. The sun moved across the sky, and the thing kept circling. Sometimes it would go higher, and I'd lose sight of it, and I'd start to hope, and then I'd see it again, lower, closer, still watching. It was patient, more patient than anything that size should be. It could wait us out, and it knew it. Around noon, Tomas said he was going to walk. He said if he followed the road, he'd eventually hit Van Horn, or find a rancher, or get a phone signal, and then he could call for help. I told him no. I told him that thing was waiting for exactly that, waiting for one of us to get away from the truck. But Tomas said, "What choice do we have, Jess? We can't stay here forever. We're going to run out of water. We're going to die if we don't do something." He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew what I saw in that thing's eyes. I knew it was watching us, learning us, figuring out which one of us would be stupid enough to run first. I told Tomas to wait until dark. At least then he'd have cover. Maybe that thing couldn't see as well at night. He said, "Are you crazy? I'm not walking through the desert at night with that thing out there." And I said, "Well, you're not walking through the desert during the day either, because you'll be an easy target." We went back and forth like that for a while, and finally he agreed to wait. But I could tell he was restless. He kept looking at the road, calculating distances in his head, thinking about how far he could run before it caught him. The sun went down. The thing was still up there. I could hear it now. That slow wing beat, circling in the dark. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. And then that call again, that horrible sound, and it was closer than before, much closer. That's when Tomas made his decision. He didn't tell me he was going. He just opened the door and got out and started running. I heard the door slam, and I turned around, and he was already 20 feet away, sprinting down the road toward Van Horn, and I yelled his name, and Elena yelled his name, and Marisol was screaming, but he didn't stop. He just kept running. I heard the wings change. Not circling anymore. Diving. I threw open my door and got out, and I looked up and I saw it coming down. This dark shape against the stars, plummeting toward the road, toward my brother, and I screamed at him to come back, but he couldn't hear me or he wouldn't listen. And then, I'm sorry, I need a minute, okay? I didn't see exactly what happened. I saw the thing descend, and I saw it reach Tomas, and I saw him get lifted. That's the only way I can describe it. 1 second he was running on the road, and the next second he was in the air, held by something, rising fast into the dark sky. I heard him scream. I heard his voice go from right there to high up, to gone in about 3 seconds. And then silence. Just the wind and my own breathing, and Elena calling my name from the truck. I got back in the truck and I closed the door, and I put my head on the steering wheel, and I don't know what I did. I think I was making a sound, but I don't know if it was crying or screaming or what. Elena was holding me, and Marisol was crying in the back seat, and I kept saying his name. I kept saying, Tomas, Tomas, Tomas. Like if I said it enough times, he'd answer. He didn't answer. We sat in that truck all night. The thing circled us a few more times, but it didn't land. It had what it wanted, I guess. Or maybe it was full. I don't know. I don't understand what it was, or what it wanted, or why it took my brother. I just know that when the sun came up, he was gone, and there was nothing in the road except his Houston Astros cap, sitting in the dirt, about 100 feet from the truck, right where it must have fallen when that thing grabbed him. I picked up the cap. I still have it. It's on the table next to me right now. Around 10 in the morning, a rancher drove by in his pickup. He saw us waving, and he stopped. And we must have looked crazy, because he got out with his hand on his hip where I'm pretty sure he had a gun. I told him our car broke down and we needed help, and he looked at us. Looked at Elena and Marisol, all tear-stained and exhausted. Looked at me with this haunted look I could see reflected in his sunglasses. And he said, okay. He gave us a ride to Van Horn, and we called Elena's sister to come get us, and we talked to the police. The police didn't believe us. Of course they didn't. I told them about the thing, about the wings, about Tomas, and they looked at me like I was losing my mind. They searched the road where it happened, and they found nothing. No blood, no feathers, no body, just that stretch of empty highway, and my broken down truck. They said Tomas probably got disoriented in the dark, wandered off the road, got lost in the desert. They said they'd keep looking. They didn't keep looking. They filed a report and called it a day, and we were supposed to just accept that my brother wandered off into the desert and disappeared. I know what I saw. I know what took him. I went back once. About a month later, I drove out to Lobo Station in a rental car in the middle of the day, and I just sat there looking at that collapsed church and those empty buildings. The town looked the same as before, just dead and empty and wrong. I didn't see the thing. I didn't hear the wings, but I felt it. I felt something watching me from somewhere, from one of those dark windows or from somewhere in the sky. And I got back in the car, and I drove away, and I've never been back. I looked it up later. What we saw. I spent hours online reading about folklore from the Texas-Mexico border, reading about things people have reported seeing out in the desert, and I found stories, old stories, stories about a thing that flies at night and takes people, carries them off into the dark. The stories had a name for it, but I'm not going to say it because saying its name feels wrong somehow, like it might hear me. But people have been seeing this thing for 100 years or more, way before I was born, way before Lobo Station was even a town. It's been out there all along, waiting in the empty places, hunting. We never made it to Abuela's birthday. She passed away 3 months later, and I didn't go to the funeral because I couldn't make myself drive through that part of Texas again. My mom still won't talk to me because of it. Elena and I don't talk about what happened, not ever. Because when we try, she starts shaking, and I start seeing his face, and we both just fall apart. Marisol hasn't been the same. She used to be this bright, happy kid, always laughing, always joking around with her Uncle Tomas, and now she barely talks. She's in therapy. We're all in therapy. It doesn't help. I can't work anymore. Every time I hear a belt grind, I think about that day. Every time I see a bird in the sky, I look twice, 3 times, to make sure it's not circling. I don't go outside at night. I don't go anywhere alone. I moved to Midland to stay with my uncle because I couldn't stay in Pecos anymore. Couldn't stay in the house where Tomas used to come over on weekends and watch the game with me. Everything there reminded me of him. Sometimes, late at night, I hear wings. Even here, in Midland, 200 miles from where it happened, I hear that sound. That slow, heavy flapping. And that call, that wrong sound that isn't quite an owl and isn't quite a woman. It's probably just in my head. It has to be just in my head. But every time I hear it, I get up and I go outside, and I look at the sky, and I wait. I don't know what I'm waiting for. Maybe I'm waiting for it to come back. Maybe I'm waiting for it to finish what it started. They never found Tomas. There's no grave. There's no closure. He's just gone. Like he never existed. Except I know he existed because I grew up with him, and I watched him graduate high school, and I was the best man at his almost wedding before his fiancée left him, and I taught him how to change a tire, and he taught me how to make abuela's tamales, and he's gone now, and I'll never see him again because something took him. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that hunts in the dark places of West Texas, where the roads stretch too long, and the help never comes in time. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I don't know if anyone will even believe me, but I had to say it. I had to get it out, because I've been holding it inside for 6 months and it's eating me alive, and if I don't tell someone, I think I'm going to lose what's left of my mind. If you ever break down out there, if you're ever stranded on one of those empty roads in far West Texas, near the border, near those old railroad towns that nobody remembers, here's my advice. Stay in your car, lock the doors, wait for daylight, and if you hear wings, if you hear that sound, that call that isn't quite right, don't look up. Whatever you do, don't look up, because it's up there. It's still up there, and it's patient. It can wait. It's been waiting for 100 years. It's got nothing but time, and sooner or later, you're going to make a mistake, and when you do, it's going to come down, and then, listen, I can hear it now. I can hear it right now, that sound. Those wings. It followed me here. I knew it would. I knew it would never stop following me. It's not going to let me go until... Hold on. Hold on. Something's on the porch. I heard something on the porch. The wood creaking, like something heavy landed on it. I'm going to go check. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it's just... My name's Trey Calvert. I'm from Tokyo, Texas. Out by the old cotton gin near Brownfield. And I work as a cell tower climber. Well, I mean, I used to work as one. I don't do that no more. I can't. I'm telling you, man, it's not about the height. I still dream about being up there sometimes. The wind and the view and all that. But then I remember the other thing, and I wake up with my sheets soaked, and this taste in my mouth like I've been sucking on pennies. Dude, you gotta listen to me because nobody else will, and I gotta tell somebody before I just lose it completely. I've been carrying this since November, and it's like a weight in my chest that gets heavier every day. Wait, I forgot to tell you the date. It was November 12th. I remember that because it was my sister's birthday, and I called her the night before, and she was all upset about turning 43, and I told her 43 ain't nothing, but she didn't believe me. Anyway, that morning I got up at 4:30 like always. I ate one of them breakfast burritos from the Allsups on Highway 380. The one with the green chile that always gives me heartburn, but I eat it anyway because it's cheap and it's hot. I was wearing my gray pearl snap shirt. The one with the cuff that's frayed where I caught it on a guy wire back in June. I punched in at 5:47 a.m. Exactly. My boss is a stickler for that kind of thing. The job was Tower 41B. Just a routine equipment check for Verizon. They said the telemetry was acting funny, dropping packets or something. Sounded easy. They always sound easy. I met Mike Dodd at the yard. Mike's my ground guy. He's been with me 3 years. Good man. Quiet. Doesn't talk much on the radio, except to say what needs saying. We loaded up my F-250, the blue one with the dent in the tailgate from where my ex-wife backed into a propane tank. We had 2 cases of water in the back and a cooler with sandwiches, and I remember thinking I should have got more ice the night before, but I forgot. The drive out to Tower 41B takes about an hour and 15 if you don't hit cattle on the road. It's off County Road 237, way out past the Hockley County line, where the pavement turns to Kalish. And the only thing out there is mesquite and windmills. I've been to that tower maybe 12 times. I know that road, like I know the scar on my left thumb. I could drive it with my eyes closed, which I have done once when I was real tired. But don't tell nobody that. We left the yard at 6:05. The sun wasn't up yet, but you could see the line of light coming up in the east. That gray-yellow color, that means it's going to be a hot day. Mike rode in the passenger seat, and we didn't talk much. He was reading something on his phone. I was listening to the classic country station out of Lubbock. They was playing George Strait. Always George Strait that early. About 20 minutes out, we started hitting fog. Not real thick at first. Just little patches in the low spots where the water collects after a rain. But then it got thicker. And it had this taste to it. I know that sounds crazy, but roll your window down in fog like that and you can taste it. This tasted metallic. Like blood, but not quite. Like when you bite your tongue and you get that copper taste, but mixed with something else. Something chemical. I told Mike to roll his window up. He looked at me funny, but he did it. The fog got so thick I had to slow down to 30. My headlights just turned it into this wall of white. I know that road, man. I know every curve and every cattle guard. But in that fog, I felt lost. Like the road had moved on me. I swear to God, I passed the same windmill 3 times. The same one. It's got a broken blade. Hangs down like a busted arm. I saw it at the 7-mile marker, then again at 9, then again at 12. I didn't say nothing to Mike. He wasn't paying attention anyway, but I started getting this feeling in my stomach like maybe we should turn around. Call it a day. Tell the office the weather was too bad. But they don't like that. They want their towers fixed. They don't care about fog. We got to the turnout for Tower 41B at 7:38. I know because I looked at the clock. The fog was still there, but it was thinner up on the hill where the tower sits. The tower's one of them older ones, 150 feet of galvanized steel with a 3-legged base and a little equipment shed at the bottom. It's got a fence around it. Chain link, 8 feet high, with razor wire on top. The gate's supposed to be locked with a master lock, the kind with the combination. I got the combination written in my notebook. 1, 4, 3, 2, 7. I remember it because it's the same as my daddy's birthday, April 7th, just backwards. We pulled up and Mike got out to open the gate. I sat in the truck with the engine running because I was cold all of a sudden. Mike shined his flashlight at the gate, and he just stood there. Didn't move, just stood there with his flashlight pointing at the lock. I rolled down my window and called out to him. I said, "Mike, what's the problem?" He didn't answer. I got out and walked over. Dude, I swear to God, that lock was already open. Hanging there on the latch, not locked, just open. I asked Mike if he opened it. He said no. He said it was like that when he got there. Now I know I locked that gate last time I was out here. I always lock it. It's the rules. But there it was, open. I thought maybe the last crew forgot, but they don't forget. They get in trouble if they forget. I took the lock off and opened the gate, and we drove through. I got out to lock it behind us. But then I thought, what's the point? I just hooked it on the latch like I found it. The equipment shed is about 20 yards from the base of the tower. It's a little metal building, maybe 10 by 10, with a steel door and a padlock. That lock was locked. I know, because I had to spin the combination. The 22nd of August, 2013. That's my daughter's birthday. August 13th. Inside the shed, it's just the base of the tower coming up through the floor, and some junction boxes, and a couple tools the company leaves out there. A spare torque wrench, some bags of connectors, that kind of thing. I got my gear out of the truck. My harness is a Petzl Avao, blue and black. I got my lanyard, and my carabiners, and my tool bag. Mike checked the radio. Channel 7, that's our channel. He said, "Test, test." I said loud and clear. He said, "Be careful up there." I always am. I started climbing at 8:15. I know, because I wrote it in the log. The climb is easy on that tower. It's got steps all the way up. Not like some of them where you gotta use the pegs, and it kills your arms. I was up to the first platform in maybe 3 minutes. That's at 50 feet. I stopped there and hooked in my fall arrest. I always double check my clips. I got 2 kids, and I ain't leaving them for no stupid mistake. I looked down, and Mike was just a shape next to the truck. The fog was still down there, thick as ever. But up where I was, it was clear. The sun was just coming up, and it turned everything this orange color. It was real pretty, actually. For a minute, I forgot about the lock, and I just looked out at the land. You can see forever from up there. All them fields sectioned off like a quilt. I could see the road we came in on. I could see the turnoff. I could even see the broken windmill. Just one blade hanging down. And I thought to myself that I didn't pass it 3 times. I was just tired. Fog plays tricks. I climbed up to the head. That's what we call the top platform. It's at 150. The equipment cabinet is up there. A big metal box full of receivers and transmitters, and all that stuff I don't understand. I'm just the hands. The smart guys in Dallas tell me what to check. This time, they said the backup battery wasn't holding charge, and the cooling fan was making noise. Easy stuff. I got my multimeter out and I opened the cabinet. The fan was screaming loud, like a bearing was shot. I could hear it plain as day. I shined my light in there, and sure enough, the fan was wobbling. I made a note. Then, I checked the battery. It read 11.2 volts. Should be 13.8. So, yeah, it was bad. I was gonna replace both. I had the new battery in my haul bag and a new fan assembly. I was working on getting the old fan out when I heard something. Now listen, you hear stuff on towers. The wind makes them sing. The guy wires hum. The metal expands and pops. But this was different. This was a hum. But it was coming from inside the cabinet. Not the fan. Lower frequency. Felt it in my teeth. I pulled my hands out and just listened. Mike came over the radio. He said, "Trey, you okay?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "You stopped moving." I told him I was listening to something. He said, "Listening to what?" I said, "This hum." He said he didn't hear nothing. Well, of course, he didn't hear nothing. He's on the ground. But then he said something weird. He said, "The fog is moving funny." I asked, "What does that mean?" Moving funny. He said it's like it's swirling. Like there's something moving inside it. I looked down, but from up there you can't see the fog real good. You just see the top of it. This white blanket. I told him to get in the truck if it spooked him. He said he wasn't spooked, but he sounded spooked. I went back to work. I got the fan out, and I was putting the new one in when I dropped a bolt. It was one of them little 1/4-inch bolts with the nylon lock nut. I heard it hit the platform, and I heard it roll. Now the platform is grated steel. You drop something, it falls through the grating. That's just physics. But this bolt didn't fall. It rolled. I heard it roll across the platform, like it was on solid metal. I heard it roll away from me, and then I heard it stop, like it hit a wall. But there's no wall up there. It's just open platform. I got down on my hands and knees, and I shined my light around. No bolt. I looked through the grating. No bolt on the level below. I looked in the corners. No bolt. It was just gone. And I know I heard it roll. I know what I heard. I told Mike I dropped a bolt. He said, "So what?" I said it vanished. He said, "You're tired. Maybe you didn't really drop it." I know I dropped it, man. I felt it slip out of my fingers, but now it's gone. I got another bolt out of my bag and I finished the job. I replaced the battery too. Whole thing took maybe 40 minutes. I closed up the cabinet and I started down. Here's where it gets weird. No, wait. I mean, it was already weird, but here's where it gets worse. I was climbing down and I looked at the first platform, the one at 50 feet. I was gonna stop there and take a break, drink some water. But as I got close, I saw something on that platform. It was the bolt. I swear to God, it was the bolt I dropped. It was just sitting there, right in the middle of the platform, like somebody placed it there. And it couldn't have fallen through the grating and landed there because the grating above is the same as the grating below. Things don't fall through and then land on the lower level. They just fall. But there it was. I picked it up. It was warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. But the sun wasn't that strong yet, and that platform had been in shade. I put it in my pocket, and I kept going down. I didn't tell Mike about the bolt. I didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy. I got to the ground at 9:22. I logged it. Mike was sitting in the truck with the engine running. I asked him why he was in the truck. He said he got cold. It was maybe 50 degrees out. Not cold. But I didn't push it. I asked him if he saw anything in the fog. He said the fog lifted about 10 minutes ago. Just went away all at once. I looked around, and sure enough, it was gone. Clear as a bell. I could see all the way to the highway. I told Mike to help me put the gear away. He got out and we started packing up. I was coiling my lanyard when I heard a sound from the equipment shed. It was a click, like a lock turning. I looked at Mike. He heard it too. We both just stood there looking at that shed. I said maybe it's the metal cooling. He said maybe, but it wasn't the metal cooling. Metal cooling makes popping sounds. This was a click, like somebody unlocked the door. I walked over to the shed. The door was still closed. The lock was still on it, hanging there like I left it. I touched it. It was cold, but the door moved, just a little, like somebody pushed on it from the inside. I jumped back. Mike asked what? I said the door moved. He said no, it didn't. I said I'm telling you it moved. He said I was seeing things. Maybe I was, but I don't think I was. I opened the shed. Inside it was dark. I shined my light in. Nothing. Just the tower base and the junction boxes and the spare tools. But the spare torque wrench was on the floor. It should have been on the shelf. I always put it on the shelf. I asked Mike if he went in there. He said no. He said he ain't been near the shed since we got here. I believe him. Mike don't lie. I picked up the wrench and put it back on the shelf. That's when I noticed the footprints in the dust on the floor. They were small, like a kid's footprints. But the shed door was locked. There's no other way in. No windows. Just that door. And I know them footprints weren't there when we arrived. I would have seen them. I always look at the floor when I open that shed. Just habit. They weren't there. But now they were. I locked the shed back up. I told Mike we needed to go. He didn't argue. We threw the rest of the gear in the truck, and I drove out of there faster than I should have. The Kalish road was rough, and I was kicking up dust everywhere. I didn't care. I just wanted to be on pavement. We got to the highway, and I felt better. I felt like I could breathe again. Mike didn't say nothing for a long time. Then he asked me if I believed in ghosts. I said no. He said good. Then he said because he thinks that tower is haunted. I told him that's stupid. Towers ain't haunted. He said maybe not haunted, but something. He said he felt like something was watching him the whole time. From the fog. He said he saw shapes moving in it. Not animals. Shapes. Tall and thin. And they didn't walk. They just kind of flowed. I told him to stop talking. I didn't want to hear it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that bolt. And the footprints. And the click. We got back to the yard at 11. I logged the job complete. The boss asked if everything went okay. I said, yeah. Fine. He said, good. He don't need to know about bolts that vanish and footprints in locked sheds. I went home. I took a shower. I was standing there with the hot water running over me and I realized I still had that bolt in my pocket. I took it out. It was still warm. I set it on the sink. I looked at it. It looked normal, but it wasn't mine. I mean, it was the same size, same thread, but the head was different. Mine are all hex heads. This one had a weird kind of star shape on it, like them screws you see in electronics, but it was a 1/4-inch bolt. They don't make 1/4-inch bolts with star heads. At least I ain't never seen one. I threw it in my toolbox and forgot about it. Or tried to forget. That night I went to bed early. I was tired. I fell asleep real quick, but I woke up at 2:47 a.m. Exactly. I know because I looked at my phone. I woke up because I heard a hum. That same hum from the cabinet. Low and deep, felt it in my teeth. I thought maybe it was the air conditioner, but the AC wasn't on. It was November. I got up and walked around the house. The hum was coming from outside. I opened the front door. It was cold out. The stars were bright, but the hum was there. It was coming from the direction of the highway, from the direction of Tower 41B. I shut the door and locked it. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. Next day, I called in sick. I never call in sick. Boss asked what was wrong. I said, I think I got food poisoning from that burrito. He said, okay. I spent the day in my garage. I was organizing my tools. I do that when I'm nervous. I got everything laid out on the bench, and I was wiping them down with oil, and I found that bolt again. The starhead bolt. I picked it up. It was warm. Still warm. Like it had been sitting in the sun, but it was in my toolbox in the garage. No sun in there. I dropped it. It rolled across the bench and fell behind the workbench. I heard it hit the floor. I didn't go looking for it. I just left it there. 3 days later, they sent another crew out to Tower 41B. Some problem with the new fan I installed. It wasn't spinning right. The office called me and asked if I remembered tightening the bolts. I said, yeah, I tightened them to spec. They said the whole assembly was loose. Like I hadn't tightened nothing. They said the fan was just flopping around. I said, that's impossible. They said, come out and look. So I went. Mike came with me. We drove out there, and the whole way, I felt sick. Like that feeling you get before a tornado. That pressure in your ears. Mike didn't say nothing. He just stared out the window. We got to the gate and it was open again. Just like before. I asked Mike if he locked it last time. He said he thought I did. I know I did. But there it was. Open. We drove in. I got my gear. I told Mike to stay in the truck this time. He said okay. I started climbing. I got to the head, and I opened the cabinet. The fan wasn't loose. It was gone. The whole assembly. The new fan I put in. The bracket. The bolts. All of it. Gone. Just gone. The wires were just hanging there, cut clean, like with wire cutters. But the weird thing is the cuts were old. The copper was tarnished. Like they'd been cut months ago. Not 3 days. The battery was gone too. The whole compartment was empty. Just empty. I called Mike on the radio. I said, Mike, the equipment's gone. He said, what equipment? I said, everything. He said, that's impossible. I said, I know it's impossible, but it's gone. He said, come down. I said, yeah, I'm coming down. I was climbing down and I got to that first platform at 50 feet. I looked at it. I don't know why I looked. I just did. And there was something on it. It was a boot print. In the middle of the platform. A boot print. Not mine. I wear size 11 Wolverines. This was smaller. Maybe a size 8 or 9. And it was pointed towards the tower. Like somebody had stood there looking up. But I was the only one up there. I know I was. I touched the print. It was fresh. The steel was still wet. I climbed down faster than is safe. I almost missed a rung. I got to the ground, and Mike was standing there, looking at the shed. I asked him what. He said the door is open. I said, no, it ain't. I locked it. He said, look. I looked. The door was open. Not all the way. Just cracked. Like somebody was inside, and they pushed it open a little. I walked over. I could hear my heart in my ears. I pushed the door open. The torque wrench was on the floor again, and there was more footprints. Them little kid prints. Leading from the shelf to the door, like somebody had picked up the wrench and carried it over, and then left. But the door was locked. The lock was still on the latch. I know it was. I checked it. Mike said he didn't touch nothing. I believe him. We left. We didn't even close the gate. We just left. I told the boss the equipment was vandalized. He said, call the sheriff. I did. Sheriff came out and took a report. He said there was no sign of forced entry on the shed. I said the lock was open. He said maybe I forgot to lock it. I said I didn't forget. He said, okay. He filed his report and left. The company replaced the equipment. They sent a different crew to install it. I didn't go back. I told them I was sick. They said okay. But here's the thing. I started hearing that hum all the time. In my house, in my truck, in the grocery store. It's always there. Just underneath everything. Like a background noise you can't filter out. I went to the doctor. He said my hearing was fine. He said maybe it's tinnitus. I said it's not tinnitus. Tinnitus rings. This hums. He gave me some pills. They didn't help. I started seeing things too. Not like hallucinations, just little things. I'd set my keys on the counter and turn around and they'd be on the table. I'd put a glass in the sink and find it in the cabinet. I'd wake up, and my boots would be at the foot of my bed, all clean. I never clean my boots. They're covered in tower grease and dust. But there they'd be, clean as new. I asked my kids if they were doing it. They said no. I believed them. Then the dream started. I'm back on Tower 41B. I'm climbing. But the tower never ends. I climb, and I never get to the top. And I can hear Mike on the radio, but his voice is wrong. It's not Mike. It's something else using Mike's voice. And it keeps telling me to look down. But I don't want to look down, because I know what I'll see. I'll see that platform at 50 feet, and I'll see that boot print, and I'll see something standing in it. Something tall and thin that flows instead of walks. And I know if I see it, I'll be stuck there. Forever. I'll be part of the tower. I'll be the hum. I'll be the bolt that rolls the wrong way. I'll be the footprints in the lock shed. 2 weeks ago, I quit. I told the boss I couldn't do it no more. He asked why. I said, I'm just done. He said, okay. He said he understood. He didn't ask questions. I think he knew something was wrong. I think Mike told him. Mike quit too. He moved to Oklahoma. He called me before he left. He said, Trey, I'm sorry. I said, for what? He said, for leaving. I said, you gotta do what you gotta do. He said, yeah. He said one more thing before he hung up. He said, do you ever think about that bolt? I said, what bolt? He said, the one you dropped. I said, yeah, I think about it. He said, me too. He said, I got one too. I said, what do you mean? He said, after that day I found a bolt in my truck. It was warm. It had that star head. I asked him what he did with it. He said he threw it in the river. I said, did that help? He said, no. He said the river started humming. Then he hung up. I got that bolt still. The one from my pocket. The starhead one. I keep it in a coffee can in my garage. I check it sometimes. It's always warm. Always. Even in winter when the garage is freezing. That bolt is always warm. And sometimes, I think I hear it move. In the can. Like it's trying to roll out. Like it's trying to get back to the tower. I put a brick on top of the can. It still moves. I hear it scraping against the metal. Little scrapes. Like fingernails. I don't go in the garage no more. I park my truck in the driveway. I don't need that noise in my life. Last night I woke up at 2:47 again. Exactly. I heard the hum. But this time it was louder. This time it was coming from inside my house. I got up and I followed the sound. It was coming from my daughter's room. She's away at college. The room is empty. I opened the door. The hum stopped. But the room was wrong. The bed was on the other side. The dresser was moved. The posters on the wall were different. They were posters I ain't never seen before. Bands I don't know. I turned on the light. The room went back to normal. Bed where it should be. Dresser where it should be. Posters of that boy band she likes. But I know what I saw. I know the room changed. Just like that. Shed changed. Just like that. Tower changed. It's all the same thing. It's all connected. I called the sheriff again. I told him I think something followed me home from Tower 41B. He said, Trey, you sound stressed. He said, maybe you should talk to somebody. I said, I'm talking to you. He said, I mean a professional. I said, I ain't crazy. He didn't say nothing for a long time. Then he said, look, I'll drive out there tomorrow. I'll check on the tower. I said, thank you. He never called me back. I called him today. He said he went out there. He said everything looked fine. He said the gate was locked. He said the shed was locked. He said the equipment was all there. He said maybe I was remembering wrong. Maybe I went to the wrong tower. Maybe I was confused. I ain't confused. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know that tower is wrong. I know that place isn't just a place. It's something else. It's like a sore on the world. And I touched it. I climbed inside it. I worked on it. And now it's inside me. I don't go out much now. I stay home. I got my groceries delivered. I don't answer the phone unless it's my kids. I keep all the lights on at night. But that don't help, 'cause the hum is still there. And sometimes I hear footsteps, little ones, like a kid walking in the hall. But my kids are grown, and sometimes I hear Mike's voice on the radio, Channel 7, just static mostly. But then, a voice comes through. It says, look down. It says, don't look down. It says different things. I threw away all my radios. I smashed them with a hammer, but I still hear it. Comes through the TV sometimes. Comes through the computer speakers. I unplugged everything. Still hear it. I think it's coming from inside my head. But it ain't my voice. It's the tower's voice. It's the bolt's voice. It's the thing that lives in that space between what is and what ain't. I got a map of all the towers in West Texas. I hung it on my wall. I put red pins in the ones I've worked on. There's a lot of pins. But Tower 41B is the only one that bothers me. I dream about it. I see it when I close my eyes, that 150 feet of steel. And I see that platform at 50 feet. And I see that boot print. And I know that if I ever go back there, if I ever touch that gate again, I'll disappear. Just like that bolt disappeared. Just like Mike disappeared. Just like the equipment disappeared. I'll be gone. But not dead. No, sir. I'll be part of it. I'll be the hum. I'll be the footprint. I'll be the thing that moves the wrench. I'll be the voice on the radio telling some other poor sucker to look down. My daughter called me last week. She said, Dad, you don't sound right. I said, I'm just tired. She said, you ain't been to work. I said, I quit. She said, why? I said, I got my reasons. She said, is it money? I said, no, it ain't money. She said, then what? I couldn't tell her. How do you tell your daughter that a cell tower is alive? That it eats things? That it changes when you ain't looking? That it follows you home? You don't. You just say, I'm fine. You just say, I'll be okay. But I won't be okay. I know I won't. 'Cause I can feel it. I can feel that starhead bolt in my garage calling to the tower. I can feel the tower calling back. It's like a string pulled tight between us. And one day that string is gonna snap, and I'm gonna snap with it. I'm gonna be sitting here in my chair, and I'm just gonna disappear. And nobody will know where I went. They'll just find my boots, all clean, sitting by the door. And they'll find that coffee can in the garage empty. And they'll find this phone with this recording on it. And they'll know. They'll know I wasn't crazy. They'll know I was just the first. Or maybe not the first. Maybe there's others. Maybe Mike heard it too. Maybe that's why he moved to Oklahoma. But you can't outrun it. It ain't about distance. It's about connection. Once you touch it, you're connected. You're part of the circuit. You're the backup battery that don't hold charge. You're the fan that screams in the night. You're the bolt that rolls uphill. I went to church last Sunday. First time in years. I thought maybe it would help. The preacher talked about evil. He said evil is real, and it walks among us. He said sometimes it don't look like evil. Sometimes it looks like ordinary things, like a building, like a tower, like a bolt. I wanted to stand up and say yes, yes, that's it exactly. But I didn't. I just sat there, and I felt that hum, right there in the church. Felt it in the wooden pew. I think the tower was laughing at me. I think it was saying you can't hide from me. Not in church. Not anywhere. I'm in your head. I'm in your bones. I'm that metallic taste in your mouth when you wake up at 2:47 a.m. I'm the reason your boots are clean. I'm the reason your daughter's room changes when you ain't looking. I'm the reason Mike moved to Oklahoma. I'm the reason the sheriff thinks you're crazy. I'm the reason you're sitting behind your trailer at 3 in the morning talking into a cracked phone screen hoping your neighbors ain't listening. But they are listening. They hear it too. They just don't know what it is. They think it's the windmills. They think it's the pipeline. They think it's the trucks on the highway. But it's not. It's the tower. It's always been the tower. It was there before the tower. The tower just gave it a shape, a form, something to focus on. Before that, it was just the land, just the emptiness, just the fog that tastes like pennies. But now it's got a name, Tower 41B, and it's got a voice, and it's got me, and it's got Mike, and it's got that bolt, and it's got them footprints, and it's waiting. It's waiting for the next crew, the next climber, the next ground guy who sits in the truck and sees the fog swirling. And it'll get them too. It'll get us all eventually. 'Cause it's patient. It don't care about time. It folds time. It stretches it. It makes you pass the same windmill 3 times. It makes you lose 3 hours you can't account for. It makes you drop a bolt and find it somewhere it can't be. It makes you doubt everything. And once you doubt, once you question your own eyes, once you think, maybe I am crazy, then it's got you. Then you're already gone. You're just a body walking around waiting to disappear. And you will. I know I will. Soon. I can feel it. The hum is getting louder. The bolt is moving more. The footsteps in the hall are getting closer. And Mike's voice on the radio is getting clearer. It ain't saying look down no more. It's saying come home. Come back to the tower. We miss you. The equipment needs you. The bolt needs you. The footprints need you. The fog needs you. And I'm scared. I'm so scared. But part of me wants to go. Part of me wants to climb that tower one more time and just keep climbing. Climb past the head. Climb past the 150. Climb until I ain't Trey no more. Until I'm just the hum. Until I'm just the thing that moves the wrench. Until I'm just a story that some other poor sucker tells at 3 a.m. behind a trailer that needs a new roof, speaking into a cracked phone screen, praying his neighbors ain't listening. But they are. They're always listening. 'Cause the tower is quiet. The tower is everywhere. The tower is right behind you. Don't look. Just don't look. Keep your eyes forward. Keep your hands on the wheel. Keep driving past that turnout. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. 'Cause if you stop, if you touch that gate, if you hear that hum, you're done. You're just like me. You're a survivor who ain't surviving. You're a climber who don't climb. You're a man from Tokyo, Texas, who works as a cell tower climber, or who used to, before the tower took that from me too, just like it took everything else. One piece at a time, one bolt at a time, one footprint at a time, one dream at a time, until there's nothing left but the story, and the hum, and the waiting, and the knowing that one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in a year, you're gonna disappear. And all they'll find is your boots, all clean, sitting by the door, and a coffee can in the garage, empty. And this recording, this confession, this warning, don't go to Tower 41B. Don't climb it. Don't touch it. Don't even look at it. Just let it be. Let it hum. Let it sing. Let it call. But don't answer. Please, God, don't answer. I answered, and now I'm just waiting. Waiting for the fog to come back. Waiting for the footsteps. Waiting for the bolt to roll across the floor of my bedroom. Waiting for Mike to call me from Oklahoma and say it's too late. Waiting for my daughter to come home and find me gone. Waiting for the tower to finally take what it wants, which is me. All of me. Every last piece. Until I'm just a memory. until I'm just a hum, until I'm just a starhead bolt in some other poor sucker's pocket. Warm, always waiting, always calling, always there, just outside sight, just outside knowing, just outside everything, but getting closer. Every day, every night, every 2:47 a.m. It's getting closer, and I'm so tired. I'm so tired of running. I'm so tired of being scared. I'm so tired of being the one who knows. I just want it to be over. But I know it won't be over. It'll never be over. Not until I go back. Not until I climb. Not until I become what I've been running from. Not until I'm the thing in the fog. The thing that flows. The thing that moves the wrench. The thing that leaves footprints. The thing that hums. The tower. I am the tower. The tower is me, and we're waiting. We're all waiting. For you. For anyone. For everyone. For every. Forever. And ever. And ever. And ever. My name's Travis Boudreau. I'm from Saratoga, Texas, and I work as a pipeline welder's helper. Or I did, until last August, man, I'm telling you. I can't even drive down Highway 105 anymore without my hands shaking so bad I have to pull over. Wait, I already said that wrong. I don't work there anymore. That's the whole point. That's why I'm calling, I guess. Or why I'm recording this. I don't know who I'm supposed to tell. The guys at the shop just laughed and said I was sun crazy, but I wasn't. I swear to God I wasn't. And now I sleep with the radio on full blast and all the lights burning. And my wife, she left. She couldn't take it. Said I was screaming about the humming in my sleep. And she didn't sign up for this. But how do you sign up for something you didn't know could happen? You know? I'm getting ahead of myself. I always do that now. My thoughts don't go straight anymore. They circle. Like water going down a drain but never actually draining. Listen. Let me start where it started. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Make it make sense. It was August 17th. I remember because it was my sister's birthday, and I'd forgotten to call her the night before, and I felt bad about it all morning. I had 2 breakfast tacos from that little place in Councey, the one with the red roof, egg, and potato, and they were cold by the time I got to the site, but I ate them anyway. Sitting in my truck at 6:47 a.m., I punched in at 7:02. My shirt was this gray one. The one with the oil stain on the left sleeve that looks like a bird if you squint at it. And my boots were the brown steel toes I'd had for 3 years. The right one has that squeak when it gets dusty. The drought was bad last summer. Real bad. The ground was cracking open like it was trying to speak. You could see the clay splitting in patterns that didn't look natural. And the heat, man, it came down in sheets, not like normal heat. It was heavy. It pressed on your shoulders. I was working this stretch of line that runs through the big thicket, out past Warren, where the maps stop being accurate and the GPS just shows you a green blob and says recalculating over and over. We were laying new feeder line for one of the gas companies, and my job was mostly just to be there for the welder. Hand him rods, keep the generator fueled, hold things steady. I was alone that day because the welder, Jimmy, he was supposed to meet me there at 8, but he texted saying his kid was sick, and he was running late, so I started the prep work by myself. That's what I told the foreman later anyway. The site was this clearing we'd cut out of the pine trees, maybe 50 yards long, and the pipe was stacked at the north end. These 30-foot sections of 12-inch steel, they make this sound when they settle. This little groan, like they're tired from being hauled around. I was checking the junction points, just walking the line with my clipboard. And I had this old handheld radio clipped to my belt, the black Motorola that's got the crack in the screen from when I dropped it in a mud pit last March. I remember the time because I looked at my watch. It was 9:33. And I was thinking about how I needed to get the generator running by 10 so it would be warmed up for Jimmy when he got there. And that's when I first heard it. The humming. I thought it was the generator at first. even though I hadn't started it yet. You know how your brain just files things away in the wrong drawer sometimes? But it was this low frequency. Felt it more in my teeth than my ears. And it was coming from the pipe stack, which is normal, sort of. Pipe does vibrate in the heat, expansion and contraction. But this was different. It had a rhythm, like a heartbeat if a heartbeat was mechanical. I walked over and put my hand on the top section and I could feel it, this pulse, steady, every 3 seconds. And there was this faint high note riding on top of it, like feedback from a microphone but softer. I figured it was maybe some pressure left in the line from the testing phase. Maybe a valve wasn't bled right, so I didn't think much of it. I wrote it down on my clipboard, check for pressure bleed, and moved on. That's what I keep going back to. That moment. What if I'd just left? What if I'd called the foreman and said something feels off? Send someone else. But you don't do that. You don't walk off a job because a pipe is humming. That's how you get a reputation, so I stayed. Jimmy texted at 10:14 saying he was still stuck. Kid had to go to the doctor. Might not make it at all. And I texted back, "No worries, I got it." Even though I didn't got it. I was just a helper. I wasn't certified to run the welder alone. But the foreman, he'd been writing us about delays, and I didn't want to be the reason we fell behind. So I decided to start without Jimmy. I'd done it before. Just tack welds. Nothing structural. Keep the timeline moving. The hum was still there, but it had changed. It was following me. I know that sounds insane. I know it does. But I'd walk 20 yards down the line, and it would be in the pipe there too. Same pitch, same pulse. And when I'd walk back to the stack, it would be silent there and humming in the section I just left, like it was staying with me, keeping pace. I started the generator at 10:38. It roared to life. That big diesel cough. And for a minute I couldn't hear anything else, which was a relief. I got my hood on, checked my gloves, started laying a tack weld on the first junction. The arc is so bright it burns everything else out. You know, you can only see the puddle of metal and the seam. Everything else is just shadows. But the sound of the weld, that sizzle, it was being eaten by the hum. The hum was louder now. It was coming from inside the pipe I was working on. I could feel it through my gloves. This vibration that wasn't the normal generator shake. It was too clean, too intentional. I stopped welding. I pulled my hood up. The hum stopped. Complete silence. Even the generator seemed muffled, like someone had put a blanket over it. And then the radio on my belt crackled. That's normal, static, sunspots, whatever. But this wasn't static. It was a voice, so faint I thought I was imagining it. It said my name, Travis, clear as day, like someone was standing right behind me, whispering into the speaker. I spun around. Nothing. Just the clearing, the trees, the dust. I unclipped the radio and held it to my ear. Nothing but dead air. I told myself it was a cross frequency. Maybe some trucker on a CB. Maybe the welders on the next site over. They sometimes bleed through, but they don't know your name. They don't say it like they know you. I went back to work. I had to. The foreman was going to call for a progress check soon, and I needed to have something to show. I started welding again, and this time the hum was in my hood. Man, I swear to God, it was like it was in the metal itself, resonating through the headband, and the voice came back, same volume, same tone. It said, "Cold today." Just that. Cold today. Which was insane because it was 104 degrees and I was pouring sweat into my eyes. My shirt was soaked through. I could feel it sticking to the small of my back. I stopped again. I took my hood off and just stood there in the clearing, listening. The generator was running, but it sounded far away. The woods were silent. No birds. No insects. Nothing. That's when I noticed the dust. It was falling upwards. Little spirals of it, lifting off the ground, dancing in the air. But not like a dust devil. Not random. They were forming these little columns, 6 of them, perfectly spaced, and they were spinning counterclockwise. I watched them for maybe a full minute. just frozen there. And then they collapsed all at once, just fell back to the ground like someone cut their strings. The hum was back, louder. It was coming from the trees now, from everywhere, and the radio crackled again. The line is wrong. That's what it said. The line is wrong. I looked at the pipe I'd just welded, and there was a crack running through my tack weld, a fresh crack. The metal had split. While I was standing there watching dust float, I grabbed my phone. I was going to call Jimmy. I don't know why. Maybe just to hear a real voice. But there was no signal. Not just low bars. It said no service, which is normal out there sometimes. But then it started ringing. My phone started ringing like someone was calling me, but the screen was black. Just black glass. No number. No name. Just that ringtone I have. It's the old-fashioned bell one, and I couldn't make it stop. I pressed the power button. I held it down. Nothing. It rang and rang and rang. I dropped it in the dirt and stomped on it. Which was stupid. It's a phone. You can't stomp it dead. But I did. 3 times. And it finally stopped. When I picked it up, the screen was cracked worse. But it showed the time. 11:11. I'd been there for less than 4 hours. Felt like all day. I decided I was leaving. Jimmy could deal with the foreman. I didn't care. I was going to tell them I got heat exhaustion or something. Which wasn't far from true. My head was pounding. My vision was doing that tunnel thing. I started walking back to my truck, which was parked by the road, maybe 100 yards from the pipe stack, and the hum followed me. It was in my boots. I could feel it in the soles. This thump, thump, thump. And the radio on my belt, it started picking up something else. This wet sound, like someone walking through mud, heavy steps, squelching, and then breathing. Just breathing, not mine. I was holding my breath. I could hear someone else breathing through the radio speaker. Slow, measured, like they were trying to be quiet, but the mic was too close. I unclipped it again and turned the volume all the way down. I could still hear it. The breathing was coming from the air around me. From that still, dead air. I started running. My truck was right there. I could see it, but the distance stretched. I know everybody says that. They say it felt like miles, but this was real, man. I was running, and the truck wasn't getting closer. It was like the ground was unrolling under me, keeping me in place. I looked down, and my boots weren't leaving prints. The dust I was kicking up just settled back into the shape of undisturbed ground. I stopped running. I was 10 feet from my truck. I could see the keys dangling in the ignition where I'd left them, but I couldn't move forward. Something was blocking me. Not a wall. There was nothing there. But every time I tried to take that last step, my legs just wouldn't go. Like when you're dreaming and you try to run but you're stuck in molasses. The hum was so loud now, it was like a physical weight on my shoulders pushing me down. My ears were ringing, and the voice came back. But this time it wasn't in the radio. It was in the trees. It was in the pipe. It was in my own head. But it wasn't my voice. It said, "Stay on the line." Not like a command. More like a fact. Like it was telling me what I was already doing. Stay on the line. I don't know how long I stood there. My watch said 11:14. 3 minutes had passed. Felt like hours. I finally managed to move. But it wasn't toward the truck. It was back toward the pipe. My legs just turned and walked. I wasn't doing it. I know how that sounds. I know. But I wasn't. I was screaming inside my own skull to stop, to run, to get out. But my body just walked back to the pipe stack, like it was clocking in for a shift. The hum was pleased. I could feel it. The vibration changed. It got warmer, almost comforting, like a cat purring. And the radio on my belt, which I'd turned off, it started playing music. Not a song I knew. It was an old hymn, the kind my grandma used to hum. But it was all played on these low, warped notes, like a record player melting in the sun. I could hear words. but they weren't English. They weren't any language. They were just sounds that felt like words, and I understood them. I don't know how, but I did. They were saying the same work, the same day, the same cut, the same weld, over and over, like a mantra, like a schedule. I got back to the pipe and my hands just picked up the welder. They started working. I was watching from somewhere behind my own eyes. Just a passenger. I welded the crack I'd made, but the weld was wrong. It was too thick. It bulged out like a scar. And as soon as I finished, the hum would pulse, and the crack would reappear. Same place, same shape, like the metal had a memory it couldn't shake. I did it again. Same result. Again. Again. I lost count. My watch said 11:22. 9 minutes. I'd been doing the same 6-inch tack weld for 9 minutes. The sun hadn't moved. The shadows were in the same place. The generator still read the same fuel level, even though it should have been half empty by now. Nothing was changing except the dust. It was still falling up. Little columns everywhere, hundreds of them, and they were spelling something. I know this is where you stop believing me, I know, but they were. The dust was forming letters. Not English letters. These symbols, sharp angles, like lightning bolts frozen mid-strike. And they were hovering at eye level, spinning slow. And I could read them. They said, measured and marked. That's what they meant. Measured and marked. The radio crackled again, and this time it was Jimmy's voice. I knew it was Jimmy because of that little lisp he has when he's tired. But he wasn't calling me. He was talking to someone else. And he was saying, yeah, Travis is out there alone. I told him to wait, but he's a company man. He'll start without me. Then another voice, not a voice I'd ever heard. It was too smooth, too even. It said, he's on the line now. And Jimmy said, good, we need the line. I screamed into the radio. I pressed the button, and I screamed, Jimmy, get out here, something's wrong. But when I let go of the button, and the static cleared, I heard my own voice say, everything's fine, just finishing up. It was my voice, my exact voice, but I hadn't said it. The radio had said it for me. It had recorded me, or copied me, or whatever the hell it does, and it was speaking in my place. I dropped the radio. I stomped on it. This time it cracked open, and the battery fell out, but the voice kept going. It was coming from the pipe itself now, this little tinny speaker quality. Like the whole length of steel was a microphone. And it was still having my conversation with Jimmy, still telling him everything was fine, still saying I'd be back in the yard by 4. I grabbed a pipe wrench. I was gonna smash the weld, smash the whole damn junction. I didn't care about the job anymore. I didn't care about anything. I just wanted the voice to stop. But when I swung the wrench, it stopped mid-swing. Not like I stopped it, like the air got thick and grabbed it. The wrench was just hanging there. And I could feel something turning it, pulling it from my hand, and it dropped to the ground and bounced twice. And both times it hit, the sound was wrong. It was the sound of metal hitting flesh. That wet thud. You know it if you've ever heard it. I have. I worked a rodeo once. Saw a bull step on a guy's hand. It's a sound you don't forget. That's what the wrench made when it hit the dirt. Twice. I backed away. My legs let me this time. I backed all the way to my truck. And this time I could get to it. This time the distance didn't stretch. And I grabbed the door handle, and it was hot. Burn your hand hot, even though the truck was in shade. And when I opened it, the inside smelled like rain. Like that smell before a storm, ozone and wet concrete. But it hasn't rained out there in 6 weeks. The radio in the truck, the regular FM radio, it was on. I never leave it on. It was tuned to static. But the static had a rhythm, that same thump, thump, thump. And I could hear voices in it, distant, like a crowd of people all talking at once. But they were all saying numbers, just numbers. 472, 472, 472, over and over. I turned the key and the engine started, but the sound didn't stop. It got louder. It was coming through the speakers, through the vents, through the steering wheel. I could feel it in my palms. I put it in drive and I floored it. The tires spun in the dust but didn't kick any up. The truck moved, but the clearing didn't get smaller. It was like I was on a treadmill. The trees just scrolling past. The pipe stack staying right there in my rear view, not shrinking. I looked at the speedometer. It said I was doing 60, but the GPS said I hadn't moved. 0 mph. The coordinates were the same as when I'd punched in. I'd been driving for 5 minutes and I was still at the worksite. I stopped the truck. I got out. I left the keys in it. I left my clipboard. I left my lunchbox with the 2 sandwiches my wife had made. Turkey and cheese. She puts mustard on both slices of bread so it doesn't get soggy. I left it all. I just started walking down the access road. I'd walked that road 100 times. It's a straight shot to the county road. 2 miles. Maybe less. I walked for an hour. The sun didn't move. It stayed at that 11 o'clock position, just baking down. And the road didn't end. It just repeated. The same bend, the same dead tree on the left, the same rusted out barrel that someone dumped there years ago. Same everything. I passed the barrel 12 times. I counted. Each time it was in the exact same spot, but the contents were different. First time it was empty. Second time it had water in it. Third time it was full of welding rods. Fourth time it had my lunchbox in it. My lunchbox. I could see the blue plastic, the sticker from my kid's school fundraiser. I didn't open it. I just kept walking. But after the 5th time, the barrel had my boots in it. The brown ones, the ones I was wearing. They were in there, caked in dust, but they were still on my feet. I could feel them. I could see them on my feet. But there they were, in the barrel. I sat down in the road. Just sat right down. I was done. My brain was full. It couldn't hold any more of this. And I put my head in my hands, and I listened. The hum was gone. The radio was gone. The voices were gone. There was just the sound of the wind in the pines, which was worse, because it was normal. It was too normal. Like everything that had just happened was something I'd made up. I sat there for I don't know how long, and then I heard a truck. Real truck. Engine sound, tires on gravel. I looked up, and it was Jimmy's truck. His red F-150, with the dent in the tailgate, and he was driving toward me. He pulled up and rolled down the window, and he said, "Hey man, why you sitting in the road?" And I just stared at him. He looked real. He looked normal. He had his coffee mug, the one with the fish on it, and his welding hood on the seat. I got up and I walked over to his truck and I said, "Jimmy, something's wrong with the sight." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I tried to explain. I tried to tell him about the hum and the dust and the barrel, but the words wouldn't come out right. They came out in that other language. Those lightning bolt symbols just spilled out of my mouth. I could feel them forming on my tongue, sharp and electric. Jimmy's face went blank. Not confused blank. Empty blank. Like someone erased him for a second. Then he smiled. It wasn't Jimmy's smile. Jimmy has this gap in his teeth on the left side. This smile was perfect. Straight teeth. And it was too wide. He said, "Get in the truck, Travis." I backed away. He said it again. Same tone, same smile. "Get in the truck, Travis." I turned and I ran into the trees. I could hear his truck following, but it wasn't driving on the road. It was just moving through the woods. Not crashing through. Just gliding between the pines like they weren't there. And he was still saying it. "Get in the truck. Get in the truck. Get in the truck." And it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was the welder's voice. It was the radio voice. It was my own voice. All of them at once. I found a deer blind. Just this old wooden box up in a tree. Hunting blind. Must have been there for years. The ladder was half rotted. But I climbed it anyway. Pulled the door shut behind me. The inside smelled like mold and cigarettes, and there was a folding chair and some empty beer cans. and I sat there in the dark, just shaking, trying to make myself small. The truck stopped below me. I heard a door open and close. Then footsteps, but they weren't boots. They were bare feet, slapping on the dry leaves. Slow, deliberate. They circled the tree, once, twice. Then they stopped, right below the blind. And the voice, it wasn't Jimmy anymore. It wasn't anyone. It was just a voice made of static and pipe metal and dead air. It said, measured and marked. And I understood what it meant. The pipe, the line. It wasn't for gas. It was for something else. It was a marker, a measurement, a way of claiming. And I had welded it. I had sealed it. I had made it real. I stayed in that blind until the sun went down, which is impossible, because I got there at noon. But the light just faded, slow and red. And when it was dark, I could see lights in the woods, little blue lights, like pilot lights, hundreds of them, all along the path where the pipe was laid. They weren't flickering. They were steady, and they were moving. The pipe was moving. I could hear it, this groan of metal sliding through the earth, like a snake, like the whole 2-mile section we'd laid was shifting, adjusting, finding its place. The hum was back, but it was a chorus now. 1,000 voices, all humming that same note, that same rhythm, and I could hear my name in it, woven in, not spoken but encoded, like I was part of the pattern now. I climbed down from the blind when the lights were far enough away, and I walked the other direction, just walked through the woods until I hit a fence line, and I followed that fence until I came out on a ranch road I didn't recognize, and I walked that until a rancher in a side-by-side found me at dusk. He said I looked like hell, asked if I'd been in a wreck. I said yeah. That's all I could say. Yeah. He gave me a ride to my truck, which was still parked at the site. And when I got there, everything was normal. The pipe was where we'd left it. The generator was off. My clipboard was on the ground where I'd dropped it. But the weld I'd done, the one I'd done 100 times, it was still cracked, still broken. And there were footprints around it. Hundreds of them. Bare feet, all the same size, all leading to the pipe, and then stopping, like whatever made them had just stepped into the metal and disappeared. I got in my truck and I drove. The GPS worked this time. The road was the right length. I got home at 2:13 a.m. My wife was asleep. I stood in the shower for an hour, just letting the water run, trying to wash the sound out of my skin. It didn't work. I didn't go back the next day. I called in sick. I called in sick the day after that. The foreman called me on the 3rd day and said I needed a doctor's note or I was fired, and I said, I quit. Just like that. He asked what the hell was wrong with me, and I tried to tell him. I tried to explain about the hum and the voices and the barrel, and he said, Travis, that line is dead. We haven't even run pressure tests yet. There's no way you heard anything in the pipe. I asked him what he meant by dead. He said it was scheduled for demolition. Had been for months. The company had lost the permit. The landowner was suing. That whole section was getting pulled up and scrapped. It had never been active. It had never been connected. It was just pipe in a field, going nowhere. That was when I understood. It wasn't about the gas. It never was. The pipe was just a shape, a form, something to hold the sound, the measurement, the marker. I asked the foreman when they'd laid that section. He said they hadn't, not yet. It was on the schedule for next month. I told him I'd been welding it for 3 weeks. He said I must be confused. He said I'd been on the South Line, down by Beaumont, nowhere near the thicket. He sent me a picture of my timesheets, every punch-in, every location. Beaumont, Beaumont, Beaumont. Not one day in the thicket, but I have the photos on my phone. I have pictures of that clearing, that pipe, that barrel. I have the weld, the crack, the boot prints. I have them. I look at them sometimes to prove to myself I didn't make it up. But the photos are changing. The pipe in the pictures is getting longer. The barrel is moving closer to the truck. The boot prints are becoming bare footprints. And in the last one, the one I took of the weld, there's a handprint in the metal. A small hand, like a child's. And it's waving. I moved. I sold the house in Saratoga, moved up to Lufkin, thought distance would help. It doesn't. The hum followed. It comes through the pipes in my new house. The plumbing. I can hear it at night, when the water pressure changes. That same thump, thump, thump. I stopped using the sink. I shower at the gym. I don't trust any metal anymore. I threw out all my tools, sold my welder, gave away my truck, bought a little Toyota with plastic everything. But the radio still does it. Any radio. I turn on the TV and I hear my name in the static between channels. I hear that hymn. I hear Jimmy's voice saying, "Good. We need the line." I went to a doctor. He said it's tinnitus. He gave me pills. They make the hum louder. I went to a priest. He blessed me and told me to pray. The prayer came out in those symbols. He didn't notice. I didn't go back. Last week I got a package. No return address. Postmarked from Warren, Texas. Inside was a section of pipe, 12 inches long, brand new, and it was humming. I could feel it through the cardboard. I left it on my porch. The next morning it was inside, on my kitchen table. I put it in the garbage. It was back on the table that night. I buried it in the backyard, 3 feet deep. And when I came inside, there was dirt on the table, and the pipe was sitting there, like I'd just set it down. I finally drove it out to the landfill, threw it in the metal pile, watched it get crushed by that big compactor, and I felt it when it happened. Man, I felt it in my chest, like someone had put a clamp on my heart and squeezed. I drove home and there it was. Same pipe, same hum, same everything. It's under my bed now. I can hear it at night. It says my name. It says, "Stay on the line." It says, "Measured and marked." I don't sleep anymore, not really. I drift. And when I drift, I see that clearing. I see the dust columns. I see the barrel with my boots in it. I see the blue lights in the woods. And I see the pipe. It's still there. It's still humming. And I know in the way you know your own name, that it's still growing, still moving, still measuring, and I'm part of it now. I'm in the metal. I'm in the hum. I'm in the line. I went back once. 2 weeks ago. I had to. I drove out to that access road and walked into the thicket, and I found the clearing. The pipe was gone. All of it. The whole stack. The generator. Everything. Just a bare patch of dirt. But the footprints were still there. The bare footprints. And they were fresh. They led into the trees. I followed them. I shouldn't have. But I did. They went for maybe a quarter mile. And then they stopped at this old oak tree. This massive thing with bark like black scales. And there was a hole in the trunk. Perfectly round. Exactly 12 inches across. The same diameter as the pipe. And I could hear it. The hum. Coming from inside the tree. From somewhere deep underground. And I could hear the welding. The sizzle of the arc. The sound of someone laying down a perfect bead. Over and over. Like they're trying to fix something that keeps breaking. And I knew it was me. It was my hands. My welder. I was down there. I am down there. I'm still doing the work. Still measuring. Still marking. And the line. It's not for gas. It's for us. It's for keeping us here. Keeping us working. The same work. The same day. The same cut. The same weld. I don't know how to end this. There's no ending. I'm still there. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that clearing, and the dust is spelling out my name, and the pipe is humming, and Jimmy's voice is saying, "Good, we need the line." My wife took the kids. They live in Houston now. She says I can call on Sundays. I don't call. I don't want them to hear it. The other night the phone rang and I picked up and it was my own voice on the other end. It said, "I'm still at the site. I'll be home by 4. I hung up. It called back. It always calls back. I threw the phone in the river. Bought a new one. The first call I got was from my own number. I answered. I said, "Hello." The voice on the other end said, "Stay on the line." I keep it with me now. The pipe. I carry it in a backpack. It gets lighter the farther I go from the thicket, but it never stops humming. I think it's tethered to something. I think I'm tethered now. I went to a lawyer to see if I could sue the company, make them admit what happened out there. But when I opened my backpack to show him the pipe, it was empty. He looked at me like I was crazy. I felt crazy, but when I got home, it was back on the table. It knows when you're trying to get rid of it. It knows. I got a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves, no metal, no radios, just boxes of cereal and cans of beans. But the hum is in the ventilation system. I can hear it in the hum of the freezers. I can hear it in the barcode scanner. That little beep. It's the same note, the same frequency. I asked the manager if we could change the scanner tone. He said no. I wear earplugs now, all day. But the hum is bone conduction. It vibrates through my skull. I went to a specialist. He said my inner ear is fine. He said it's probably stress. He asked if I'd experienced any trauma recently. I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. He left the room. I don't think he believed me. Nobody believes you when the horror is clean, when there's no blood, no monsters, no demons with names. They want you to have proof. But the proof is in the pipe. The proof is in the dust. The proof is in the fact that I haven't slept in my bedroom for 2 months because the air vent in there hums the wrong way. I sleep in the living room with the TV on static. It drowns it out, mostly. The other night I woke up and the TV was off. The power was out. The whole block was dark, but the static was still playing. The TV was off, unplugged, but I could still hear it. And in the static I heard Jimmy say, "We're behind schedule." I heard the foreman say, "We need the line." I heard my wife say, "You're not the same person." And I heard myself say, I know, I'm not. I'm measured. I'm marked. I'm on the line that goes nowhere and everywhere. The line that remembers every hand that touches it. The line that keeps us working. I'm telling you this because I don't know what else to do. I tried writing it down, but the words changed on the page. I tried telling my brother, but he said I needed a vacation. I tried drinking, but it made the hum clearer. I tried running, but the distance stretches. It always stretches. I'm still in that clearing. I'm still welding that crack. I'm still watching the dust spell out words I don't want to understand. And every day at 11:11, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I hear the radio crackle. I hear the voice. I hear my name. And I feel the pipe in my backpack get warm. Like it's being welded. Like someone is still working. Like the work never ends. I don't know what it wants. I don't think it wants anything. It just is. The line is wrong. The line is wrong. The line is wrong. That's what it said. That's what I know. That's what I am now. Wrong. Measured. Marked. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you, don't work out there. Don't take the jobs in the thicket. Don't touch the pipe. Don't listen to the hum. But you will, because you need the money, because you think it's just a job. Because the world is full of lines that need laying. And one day you'll find a clearing, and the dust will fall up, and the radio will speak your name, and you'll understand. You'll understand that some work doesn't end when you clock out. Some work gets into your bones, into your blood, into the way you hear the world. And you'll be like me. You'll be measured. You'll be marked. You'll be on the line. I'm still shaking. I haven't stopped shaking since August 17th. My hands, they won't steady. I can't hold a coffee cup without spilling. Can't sign my name without it looking like those symbols. Can't look at a sunrise without seeing that same sun that didn't move. Can't hear a generator without hearing the hum underneath it. Can't feel metal without feeling that vibration. Can't trust my own voice when I speak. Can't trust my own memory. Can't trust that I'm really here, really in this trailer, really talking into this phone. Maybe I'm still in the clearing. Maybe I'm still welding. Maybe this is just what the line does to you. It gives you this little window, this little story to tell yourself. So you think you escaped. So you think you're free, but you're not. You're just on a different section of the line that never ends, the line that measures everything, the line that marks us all. I don't work pipeline anymore, but the pipeline, it works me. It works me every day, every night, every time I close my eyes. I'm still laying that bead. I'm still hearing that voice. I'm still watching the dust spell out words I can't unsee. And I'm still shaking. I'm still shaking. I'm still shaking. Listen, if you hear a hum, if you feel a vibration, if the radio says your name when you know it's off, just leave. Just walk away. Don't finish the shift. Don't be a company man. Don't stay on the line. Because once you're measured, once you're marked, there's no getting unmarked. There's no getting unmeasured. There's just the work. The same work. The same day. The same cut. The same weld. Forever. I swear to God. I swear to God. I swear to God. The line is wrong. The line is wrong. The line is wrong. My name's Travis Boudreau. I'm from Saratoga. I used to work pipeline. I don't anymore. I can't. I'm still there. I'm here. I'm there. I'm measured. I'm marked. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. Please. 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 Don't listen to the hum. Don't listen to the hum. Don't listen. Don't listen. Don't listen. Listen.